For centuries, humanity had unfurled its banners across the stars, a relentless wave of expansion driven by ambition, ingenuity, and a boundless capacity for both creation and conflict. By the mid-26th century, the United Nations Space Command, or UNSC, stood as the principal governing and military body of Earth and its myriad colonies, a sprawling interstellar empire encompassing hundreds of worlds. From the verdant agricultural havens of the inner colonies to the rugged, resource-rich frontiers of the outer systems, humanity's reach seemed limitless, its future assured. Yet beneath this veneer of progress and burgeoning prosperity, fissures were forming, cracks in the foundation of an increasingly strained galactic society. The sheer scale of human expansion had inevitably led to significant disparities. The inner colonies, benefiting from proximity to Earth and established infrastructure, flourished, their populations enjoying unparalleled technological advancement and quality of life. The outer colonies, by contrast, often felt neglected, exploited for their raw materials, and burdened by what they perceived as heavy-handed governance from distant Earth. Economic inequalities festered, political representation felt inadequate, and a growing sense of disenfranchisement began to coalesce into open defiance. This was the genesis of the insurrection, a protracted and bloody civil conflict that would come to define the pre-Covenant era and stretch the UNSC's resources to their absolute breaking point. The insurrection was not a monolithic rebellion, but a decentralized network of separatist movements, paramilitary cells, and terrorist organizations, each with its own grievances and objectives. They operated with a chilling effectiveness, employing asymmetrical warfare tactics against UNSC forces, disrupting supply lines, sabotaging vital infrastructure, and conducting devastating attacks on both military and civilian targets. Bombs detonated in crowded spaceports, orbital defense platforms were compromised, and entire colonial administrations found themselves under siege. The UNSC, designed primarily for interstellar defense and exploration, found itself ill-equipped to combat an enemy that blended seamlessly into civilian populations, an enemy that knew the terrain of human space as intimately as its own soldiers. Years turned into decades, and the insurrection escalated into a full-blown civil war, consuming vast amounts of UNSC personnel, materiel, and political capital. Entire fleets were diverted from their primary duties to quell uprisings, special forces units were stretched thin across hundreds of systems, and the military's doctrine became increasingly focused on internal security rather than external threats. The conflict was a slow, agonizing bleed, eroding public trust and fostering a climate of suspicion and fear. Both sides committed atrocities, hardening hearts and deepening the schism within humanity. The UNSC leadership, particularly the Office of Naval Intelligence, or ONI, grew increasingly desperate for a solution, any solution that could bring an end to the costly and destabilizing civil strife. It was within this crucible of internal conflict, this desperate hour of human versus human, that radical ideas began to take root, ideas that challenged conventional morality and pushed the boundaries of what was considered permissible in the pursuit of peace, or at least control. Then, without warning, everything changed. The internal struggles of humanity, once seemingly paramount, were rendered utterly insignificant by an external terror of unimaginable scale. In February 2525, on the distant outer colony world of Harvest, humanity made first contact with an alien collective known only as the Covenant. The initial encounter was not one of diplomacy or cautious scientific exchange, but of unbridled aggression and genocidal intent. A UNSC reconnaissance mission discovered a massive alien fleet glassing the planet, transforming its vibrant surface into a molten wasteland. There were no demands, no negotiations, no quarter given. Just absolute, terrifying annihilation. The news, when it finally reached Earth, was met with a mixture of disbelief, horror, and a profound sense of existential dread. Humanity had always posited the existence of alien life, but rarely had it conceived of an enemy so utterly alien in its motivations, so technologically superior, and so ruthlessly committed to the eradication of all human life. The Covenant, a zealous alliance of multiple alien species united by a fanatical religious devotion, viewed humanity as an affront to their gods, an abomination to be purged from the galaxy. Their technology far surpassed anything the UNSC possessed. Their energy shields shrugged off conventional ballistics, their plasma weaponry vaporized starships and ground forces with terrifying ease, and their slip-space drives allowed them to traverse vast interstellar distances with a speed and precision that human vessels could only dream of. The early years of the Covenant War were a relentless cascade of defeats. Colony after colony fell, their populations either slaughtered outright or systematically exterminated by the Covenant's unstoppable ground forces. Entire UNSC fleets, once considered formidable, were decimated in a matter of hours, their valiant crews perishing in explosions of plasma and shrapnel. The term glassing entered the common lexicon, a chilling descriptor for the Covenant's preferred method of planetary pacification, bombarding a world's surface with superheated plasma until its oceans boiled away, its continents melted, and its atmosphere became a toxic inferno, leaving behind nothing but a fused, uninhabitable crust. Worlds that had taken centuries to terraform and colonize were reduced to barren husks in days. Panic began to spread throughout human space. Refugees streamed inwards, overwhelming inner colony systems and stretching resources already strained by the lingering effects of the insurrection. The UNSC, already fighting a two-front war against its own people, found itself utterly unprepared for an external threat of such magnitude. Its military doctrine, honed against human adversaries, proved woefully inadequate against an enemy that did not engage in conventional warfare, an enemy that did not take prisoners, and an enemy that understood no concept of surrender or negotiation. The initial strategy of engaging the Covenant head-on in fleet-to-fleet engagements proved disastrous, leading to catastrophic losses that humanity simply could not sustain. The political landscape within the UNSC became fraught with tension. Public morale plummeted as news of successive defeats leaked out, despite ONI's stringent efforts to control information and maintain a semblance of hope. The weight of command became an almost unbearable burden as admirals and generals grappled with impossible choices, sacrificing entire systems to buy precious time for others, knowing that each decision meant the certain death of millions. The very existence of humanity hung by a thread, and the desperate hour that had once been defined by internal strife was now magnified 1,000-fold by the looming specter of total annihilation. Conventional warfare was failing. Every metric, every projection, painted a grim picture of inevitable defeat. The sheer numerical superiority of the Covenant, combined with their technological dominance, meant that humanity was fighting a losing battle of attrition. There was no viable strategy for victory, only for delaying the inevitable. It was in this abyss of despair, this profound recognition of humanity's impending doom, that the most radical, the most ethically complex, and ultimately the most pivotal program in human history began to move from the shadows of theory into the harsh light of necessity. The UNSC needed a miracle, a paradigm shift in warfare, something that could tip the scales, even if only slightly, against an enemy that seemed invincible. They needed a new kind of soldier, a weapon forged from the very essence of human potential, capable of achieving the impossible. The desperate hour had arrived, demanding desperate measures, and the stage was set for a quiet history to begin, a history etched in sacrifice and born of humanity's deepest fear. It was in this unprecedented crucible of existential terror, where the very survival of humankind hung by the thinnest of threads, that the Office of Naval Intelligence, specifically its shadowy Section 3, began to dust off and reevaluate old, controversial paradigms. The conventional military machine, designed for symmetrical warfare against human adversaries, had proven catastrophically inadequate against the Covenant. Every strategic doctrine, every tactical manual, every established ethical boundary had been rendered obsolete in the face of an enemy that offered only extinction. Desperate times, as the adage went, called for desperate measures, and humanity's desperation had reached an apex previously unimaginable. The seeds of what would become the Spartan-II program were not sown in a vacuum of innovation, however, but rather cultivated in the imperfect soil of a controversial predecessor, Project Orion. Project Orion, initiated decades prior in 2506, long before the Covenant's horrifying arrival, was itself a response to a different, though no less pressing, crisis, the escalating insurrection. Faced with an elusive and often brutal internal enemy, the UNSC had sought to create a new class of soldier, one capable of operating with enhanced effectiveness in asymmetric warfare scenarios. The goal was to produce elite special forces operatives possessing superior strength, speed, and resilience, individuals who could undertake high-risk, high-impact missions with a greater chance of success and survivability. These early attempts at human augmentation, however, were fraught with ethical debate and technical limitations. The candidates for Project Orion were adult volunteers, already seasoned soldiers drawn from existing Special Forces units. They underwent a battery of experimental surgical procedures and biochemical augmentations designed to boost their physical capabilities. Muscle grafts, skeletal alterations, and neural enhancements were among the techniques employed. The results were undeniably impressive, producing soldiers stronger and faster than their unaugmented counterparts. These Orion operatives, later retroactively designated Spartans, proved highly effective in their specialized roles, conducting daring raids, intelligence gathering, and counterinsurgency operations that often turned the tide in local conflicts. Their exploits, though largely classified, became the stuff of legend within the Black operations community. Yet Project Orion was not without its profound limitations and significant drawbacks. The augmentations, while successful, were inconsistent in their efficacy. Adult physiology proved resistant to some of the more radical alterations, leading to varying degrees of success among candidates. Many volunteers suffered severe, sometimes debilitating, side effects ranging from neurological damage to organ failure. The recovery periods were extensive, and the attrition rate was unacceptably high. Furthermore, the psychological conditioning of adult soldiers, whose personalities and moral frameworks were already fully formed, proved challenging. While they were incredibly effective fighters, they retained the capacity for independent thought and, crucially, the ability to question orders, a trait that some within ONI viewed as a potential vulnerability for a truly perfect weapon. The cost-benefit analysis, considering the immense resources poured into each candidate versus the unpredictable outcomes and high casualty rates, ultimately led to the project's official decommissioning in 2521, just 4 years before the Covenant War began. It was deemed too expensive, too unreliable, and too ethically contentious for widespread implementation, even in the midst of a civil war. However, the data, the research, and the invaluable lessons learned from Project Orion did not simply vanish. They became the foundational bedrock upon which a far more ambitious and ethically challenging program would be built. Among the most brilliant minds observing Project Orion's trajectory was Dr. Catherine Elizabeth Halsey, a civilian scientist of unparalleled intellect, an expert in cognitive psychology and artificial intelligence, and a key figure within ONI's Section 3. Dr. Halsey had meticulously documented Orion's successes and, more importantly, its failures. She understood that adult subjects possessed inherent biological and psychological rigidities that limited the potential for truly comprehensive augmentation. Her conclusions were stark and uncompromising. To create a truly superior soldier, one capable of transcending human limitations, the process had to begin much, much earlier. The arrival of the Covenant dramatically reshaped the context for such radical thinking. The internal squabbles of humanity, once the sole focus of Orion, faded into insignificance against the backdrop of galactic genocide. The technological disparity between humanity and the Covenant was staggering, and conventional military responses were proving futile. Humanity was losing comprehensively and irrevocably. It was no longer a question of containing an insurgency, it was a desperate struggle for existence. In this climate of absolute desperation, the ethical boundaries that had constrained Project Orion shattered. The very notion of what was permissible in the pursuit of survival expanded to encompass previously unthinkable atrocities. Dr. Halsey, with the full backing of highly placed ONI officials who shared her grim assessment of humanity's prospects, began to conceptualize a new program, one that would leverage the lessons of Orion while pushing far beyond its limitations. This new initiative, designated Spartan-II, was designed not to augment existing soldiers, but to create them from scratch, to forge humanity's ultimate protectors from its most promising young. Her vision was terrifyingly precise. Select children of exceptional genetic potential, abduct them from their homes, and subject them to a lifelong regimen of rigorous training, conditioning, and irreversible biological augmentations, transforming them into super soldiers unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. The justification for such an morally reprehensible act was chillingly utilitarian: the survival of the entire human species. If humanity was to have any chance against the Covenant, it needed a radical paradigm shift in warfare. It needed a small number of extraordinarily capable individuals who could operate behind enemy lines, conduct surgical strikes against critical Covenant assets, and turn the tide of battle in skirmishes where conventional forces were doomed to fail. These new Spartans would be equipped with advanced power armor, the Mjolnir system, designed to further amplify their already enhanced abilities, making them virtually unstoppable on the battlefield. The armor itself would be an extension of their bodies, a complex interplay of neural interfaces, kinetic energy shields, and advanced weapon systems. The decision to recruit children, specifically 6-year-olds, was not made lightly, even within the morally gray halls of ONI. However, Dr. Halsey's research indicated that at this age, children possess the necessary biological plasticity for the augmentations to take full effect with minimal rejection and maximum integration. Their developing minds were also far more amenable to the intense psychological conditioning required to mold them into utterly dedicated, fearless warriors, stripped of conventional civilian attachments and singularly focused on their mission. It was a cold, calculated gamble, trading the individual autonomy and innocence of a handful of children for the potential salvation of billions. The ethical implications were immense, staggering in their depravity. The program was an act of state-sanctioned kidnapping, the deliberate theft of childhoods, and the irreversible alteration of human beings for military purposes. Yet the overwhelming threat of the Covenant provided ONI and the UNSC High Command with a horrifyingly potent justification. They argued in hushed tones and classified documents that the alternative was total annihilation. If humanity perished, then all ethical debates would become moot. The Spartan-II program, therefore, was framed as a necessary evil, a desperate last resort born of the most profound fear and the most urgent need. The secrecy surrounding Spartan-II dwarfed even that of Project Orion. Only a select few individuals within ONI and the UNSC knew the full truth of its inception and methods. To the public, if they ever heard of such a program, it would be presented as a voluntary initiative for adults, a testament to human courage and technological prowess. The true nature of the candidates and their origins would remain buried under layers of misinformation and stringent classification. Admiral Margaret Perengoski, the formidable head of ONI, personally oversaw the program's authorization, understanding its critical importance but also its potential to shatter public trust if ever exposed. She, like Halsey, believed that the ends justified the means, especially when the end was the very existence of humanity. Thus, in the shadows of humanity's darkest hour, with the galaxy aflame and colony after colony falling to the Covenant's relentless onslaught, the Spartan-II program transitioned from theory to horrifying reality. The framework was established, the ethical lines blurred beyond recognition, and the stage was set for the selection of its first cohort. The desperate hour had not merely arrived, it had demanded a price, a quiet history of sacrifice and moral compromise that would forever alter the destiny of humanity. The search for the chosen few, the children who would become humanity's shield, was about to begin. It was against this backdrop of cosmic horror and impending oblivion that Dr. Catherine Halsey, a woman whose intellect was matched only by her profound, often chilling, pragmatism, stepped fully into the role of humanity's most controversial savior. Her mind, a labyrinth of scientific brilliance and utilitarian philosophy, had already mapped out the terrifying contours of the Spartan-II program long before the Covenant's arrival. The alien threat merely provided the ultimate, undeniable justification for a project she had always believed was necessary, perhaps even inevitable, for humanity's long-term survival. For Halsey, the ethical quagmire was secondary to the existential imperative. She understood with a clarity that few others possessed that humanity was facing an enemy that played by no recognizable rules, and therefore humanity could not afford to be constrained by its own. Dr. Halsey was not merely a scientist, she was a visionary, albeit one with a profoundly unsettling moral compass. Her career within the Office of Naval Intelligence had been marked by groundbreaking achievements in fields ranging from artificial intelligence to human augmentation. She was the principal architect behind the Mjolnir-powered assault armor system, a marvel of engineering designed to make the wearer virtually invulnerable. Yet she knew even Mjolnir in its nascent stages was merely an amplifier. To truly shift the balance, humanity needed a new kind of warrior, one whose biological and psychological foundations were so fundamentally superior that they could fully exploit the armor's potential. This was the core tenet of her Spartan-II doctrine, the creation of a symbiotic relationship between an unyielding soldier and an impenetrable suit, each enhancing the other to achieve impossible feats. Her philosophy was rooted in a cold, mathematical assessment of humanity's predicament. Billions of lives were at stake. Conventional warfare was a losing proposition. Therefore, any action, no matter how morally repugnant, that offered a statistically significant chance of preventing total annihilation was not merely permissible, but obligatory. She did not see the children she would select as individuals with inherent rights, but as humanity's greatest, most precious resource, capable of being refined and shaped into its ultimate defense. Their sacrifice, in her eyes, was a necessary down payment on the future of an entire species. This belief, unwavering and absolute, allowed her to compartmentalize the monstrous nature of her actions, viewing them as a surgeon might view a painful, invasive, yet life-saving operation. The selection process for the Spartan-II program was an undertaking of meticulous, almost surgical precision. Dr. Halsey, alongside a dedicated team of ONI researchers, developed a battery of criteria designed to identify children with the precise genetic and psychological predispositions required for the augmentations to succeed and for the intensive training to take root. The candidates needed to be not merely intelligent, but prodigiously so, demonstrating exceptional cognitive function, problem-solving abilities, and an innate capacity for learning. Physical aptitude was equally crucial. Superior reflexes, high bone density, robust immune systems, and a predisposition for rapid muscle growth were all factored into the complex algorithms. These were not traits that could be taught. They had to be inherent, dormant potential waiting to be unlocked. ONI Section 3 operatives, working under the deepest layers of secrecy, fanned out across hundreds of UNSC colonies. They did not simply search for children. They systematically analyzed vast databases of medical records, educational assessments, and genetic profiles. They scoured population centers, from the bustling metropolises of Earth to the sparsely settled frontiers of the outer colonies, seeking out the rare individuals who met Halsey's stringent requirements. The goal was to identify approximately 150 children, narrowing the field to 75 who would ultimately form the first cohort. This wide net ensured a diverse genetic pool and minimized any discernible pattern that might raise suspicion among colonial authorities or families. The children selected were, on average, 6 years of age, an age Halsey had determined was optimal for biological integration of the augmentations and psychological conditioning, before their personalities were fully formed and resistant to molding. Once a candidate was identified and verified, the next phase, known chillingly as requisition, commenced. This was the darkest secret of the program, a state-sanctioned act of kidnapping executed with ruthless efficiency and chilling deception. ONI teams, highly trained in clandestine operations, would infiltrate the target child's home, often under the cover of night. The child would be taken swiftly and silently, leaving no trace of struggle. To prevent panic, widespread alarm, and most importantly, any inquiry into the children's disappearance, Dr. Halsey had devised a horrifyingly elegant solution, the flash clone. Each abducted child was replaced with a genetically identical clone, engineered to be short-lived and susceptible to a pre-programmed, rapidly degenerative disease. These clones were meticulously crafted to mimic the original child's appearance, down to the smallest detail, ensuring that families and communities would remain oblivious to the horrific truth. The clone would live for a few weeks or months, slowly succumbing to its manufactured illness, providing a plausible, albeit tragic, explanation for the child's eventual demise. The families would grieve, believing their child had succumbed to a rare ailment, never knowing that their son or daughter had been stolen, their life rewritten, and their future irrevocably altered. This act, perhaps more than any other, underscored the profound moral abyss into which ONI and Dr. Halsey had willingly plunged, sacrificing individual innocence for the perceived greater good of the species. Dr. Halsey's involvement in the Spartan-II program extended far beyond its initial conceptualization and the establishment of its parameters. She was deeply, personally invested in every aspect of its execution. While she maintained a scientific detachment, her connection to the children, whom she often referred to as her Spartans, was complex and profound. She saw herself not as their captor, but as their shepherd, guiding them towards a destiny she believed was glorious and essential. She personally oversaw their initial medical examinations, their psychological assessments, and even their early educational curricula. Her office on Reach, a classified research facility within the FLETCOM military complex, became the nerve center for this clandestine operation, a fortress of science and secrecy. Upon their arrival at the heavily fortified training facility on the planet Reach, the 75 selected children were not immediately subjected to augmentation. Instead, their stolen childhoods were replaced with an intensely rigorous and psychologically demanding training regimen. This phase was designed to forge their nascent abilities, instill unwavering discipline, and cultivate an absolute sense of loyalty and camaraderie. Overseeing this brutal transformation was Chief Petty Officer Franklin Mendez, a legendary UNSC Marine and an unparalleled combat instructor. Mendez was the operational counterpoint to Halsey's intellectualism, the hardened military pragmatist who would translate her scientific vision into battlefield reality. Mendez understood the grim necessity of the program, even if he did not always fully grasp the ethical nuances of Halsey's methods. His role was to break the children down and then rebuild them, not as soldiers but as weapons. He subjected them to physical conditioning that pushed the limits of human endurance, tactical exercises that demanded instantaneous decision-making under simulated combat stress, and educational programs that far surpassed anything available in civilian schools. They learned advanced mathematics, astrophysics, xenolinguistics, military history, and most importantly, the art of war. They were taught to operate as an indivisible unit, to trust their comrades implicitly, and to view mission success as the only acceptable outcome. The goal was to eliminate any vestige of their former lives, replacing civilian identities with a singular purpose, to become Spartans. The children, stripped of their names and assigned numerical designations, quickly adapted to their new reality. Their young, malleable minds absorbed information at an astonishing rate, and their developing bodies responded with remarkable resilience to the demanding physical regime. They formed bonds not of conventional friendship, but of shared hardship and mutual dependency, a brotherhood and sisterhood forged in the crucible of extreme training. They were taught to kill to survive, and to never, under any circumstances, surrender. Dr. Halsey observed their progress with a mixture of scientific fascination and a growing, almost parental pride. She believed she was giving them a purpose far grander than any they would have found in their original lives, a purpose essential for the salvation of humanity. However, the path to becoming a Spartan was fraught with peril, even before the augmentations began. The sheer intensity of the training, designed to weed out any who lacked the inherent resilience, resulted in injuries, psychological breakdowns, and even fatalities. The program was a gauntlet designed to test the limits of human potential and beyond. Those who faltered were reassigned to other, less demanding roles within the UNSC, their existence as former Spartan-II candidates erased from all records. This attrition, while heartbreaking, was deemed acceptable, a necessary sifting process to ensure only the absolute best, the most resilient, and the most adaptable would proceed to the next, most critical and most dangerous phase, the biological augmentations. The journey to reach and the years of brutal training that followed represented a profound and irreversible severance from their pasts. These children, once loved and nurtured, were now instruments of war, their innocence sacrificed on the altar of humanity's survival. Dr. Halsey, the cold architect of this transformation, believed that the ends justified the means, that the terrifying cost of their stolen lives was a price worth paying for the billions who would otherwise perish. Her conviction was absolute, her resolve unyielding. As the Covenant glassed world after world, her resolve only hardened, convinced that she was not merely creating soldiers, but building humanity's last, best hope. The stage was now set for the most controversial and perilous phase of the Spartan-II program, where the children would undergo the irreversible physical and neurological changes that would elevate them beyond mere humans, transforming them into something entirely new, something designed to face the impossible. The search for the chosen few, the children who would become humanity's shield, was about to begin. This terrifyingly precise and morally compromised endeavor was formally designated by the Office of Naval Intelligence as Operation Kaleidoscope, a codename that subtly hinted at the multifaceted, fragmented data points being meticulously assembled to form a new, chillingly coherent pattern for humanity's future. It was a clandestine intelligence operation of unprecedented scale, designed to sift through the vast tapestry of human life across hundreds of worlds, isolating the minute threads of genetic and psychological potential that Dr. Catherine Halsey deemed essential for the Spartan-II program's success. Operation Kaleidoscope was not a crude dragnet. It was a highly sophisticated, multi-layered process, orchestrated with the chilling efficiency characteristic of ONI Section 3. At its heart lay an immense data mining initiative, overseen by Dr. Halsey herself and executed by an elite team of ONI analysts and computational specialists. This team was granted unparalleled access to every conceivable database within UNSC jurisdiction, comprehensive medical records from birth to the present, intricate genetic registries maintained by colonial health authorities, detailed educational assessments, census information, even private corporate health plans and family histories. Terabytes of personal data, once considered sacrosanct, were fed into secure, quantum-encrypted server farms, where bespoke algorithms designed by Halsey's team began their relentless work. These algorithms were far beyond simple keyword searches. They were engineered to identify extremely specific genetic markers associated with heightened neuromuscular response, superior bone density, robust immune system function, and most critically, an unusual degree of neural plasticity, the brain's ability to adapt and rewire itself. Beyond the purely biological, the algorithms also delved into psychological profiles. They scoured early childhood behavioral assessments, aptitude test scores, teacher observations, and even subtle indicators from parental reports, searching for patterns that suggested exceptional cognitive function, advanced problem-solving capabilities, innate leadership potential, and a particular brand of resilience under stress. These were children who, even at a tender age, might exhibit an unusual capacity for self-reliance, a keen observational intellect, or an almost preternatural ability to overcome adversity. The goal was to find not just the smart and strong, but the truly exceptional, those whose inner fire could be forged into an unyielding weapon. Once a child's profile was flagged by the automated systems as a potential candidate, the next phase of Operation Kaleidoscope commenced: discreet, remote verification. Highly trained ONI field operatives, often individuals with backgrounds in psychology, genetics, or deep cover infiltration, were dispatched to the candidate's home world. These agents did not interact with the families or the children directly. Instead, they conducted meticulous, often prolonged, surveillance, observing the child in their natural environment, on playgrounds, within classrooms, during family outings, and even through sophisticated remote monitoring of their homes. Every gesture, every interaction, every display of intellect or physical prowess was logged and cross-referenced with the data profile. This chilling scrutiny served to confirm the algorithmic predictions, ensuring that only the most promising candidates, those who genuinely embodied the Spartan potential, would proceed to the ultimate stage. The agents involved in Operation Kaleidoscope were subjected to rigorous psychological conditioning, designed to compartmentalize the morally reprehensible nature of their mission. They were instilled with an unwavering belief in the program's existential necessity, understanding that their actions, however abhorrent, were a desperate gamble for humanity's survival. For these operatives, the children were not individuals but vital components of a grander, terrifyingly urgent strategy. Their resolve, however, was tested most profoundly during the requisition phase, the actual abduction. This was the darkest secret of the Spartan-II Program, a state-sanctioned act of kidnapping executed with chilling precision and ruthless deception. Under the cover of night, in remote locations to minimize the risk of witnesses, ONI teams would infiltrate the target child's home. The child would be taken swiftly and silently, often sedated with non-lethal agents to prevent any struggle or outcry. There was no time for goodbyes, no opportunity for the child to comprehend the sudden, terrifying severance from their past. Within minutes, sometimes hours, of the original child's extraction, a genetically identical flash clone would be inserted into their bed, meticulously crafted to mimic every detail of the original, from subtle birthmarks to nascent voice patterns. The creation of these flash clones was an engineering marvel, albeit one steeped in profound ethical depravity. Grown rapidly in artificial wombs within secure ONI laboratories, these clones were imbued with rudimentary memories and behavioral patterns, sufficient to pass initial scrutiny by unsuspecting family members. However, their existence was deliberately finite and tragic. Each clone was engineered to be susceptible to a pre-programmed, rapidly degenerative neurological disease, designed to manifest weeks or months after their deployment. This slow, insidious illness would provide a plausible, albeit heartbreaking, explanation for the child's eventual demise, appearing as a rare and untreatable ailment that doctors could not identify. Families would grieve, believing their child had succumbed to a natural tragedy, never knowing that their son or daughter had been stolen, their life rewritten, and their future irrevocably altered. This act, perhaps more than any other, solidified the profound moral abyss into which ONI and Dr. Halsey had willingly plunged, sacrificing individual innocence for the perceived greater good of the species. Dr. Halsey's involvement in Operation Kaleidoscope was absolute. She personally reviewed the dossiers of every flagged candidate, poring over genetic readouts, psychological evaluations, and field agent reports. Her logical mind, unburdened by conventional sentimentality, saw beyond the child's innocent face, perceiving instead the latent potential for humanity's ultimate protector. She made the final, agonizing decisions for each requisition, believing that the terrifying cost of their stolen lives was a price worth paying for the billions who would otherwise perish. Her conviction was unwavering, her resolve unyielding, even as the Covenant glassed world after world, further hardening her belief that she was not merely creating soldiers, but building humanity's last, best hope. The 75 children ultimately selected for the first cohort of the Spartan-II program represented a startling demographic cross-section of humanity. They were drawn from the sprawling arcologies of Earth, the lush agricultural worlds of the inner colonies, the rugged mining outposts of the outer colonies, and even remote research stations scattered across the human-controlled galaxy. This deliberate diversity ensured a broad genetic pool and minimized any discernible pattern that might raise suspicion among colonial authorities or families. It also meant that the children came from vastly different socioeconomic backgrounds, though all shared the inherent genetic and intellectual potential that Halsey's algorithms had identified. They were children of farmers, engineers, teachers, miners, and administrators, their lives abruptly interrupted, their futures irrevocably rerouted. Upon their successful acquisition, the children embarked on a covert journey to the heavily fortified training facility on the planet Reach. They were transported in specialized dropships and unmarked deep space transports, shielded by layers of ONI stealth technology and disinformation protocols. For the bewildered children waking in an unfamiliar environment, surrounded by stoic, uniformed personnel who offered clinical reassurances but little comfort, the experience was profoundly disorienting. The initial interactions with ONI personnel were cold, efficient, and devoid of emotional warmth, designed to begin the process of psychological detachment from their past lives. The arrival on Reach was a stark and overwhelming contrast to everything they had ever known. The vast, sterile corridors of the FLETCOM military complex, the constant hum of machinery, the disciplined movements of soldiers, it was a world utterly alien to their stolen childhoods. Here, their individual names were replaced with numerical designations, a deliberate act to strip away their former identities and begin the arduous process of forging a collective, singular purpose. They were no longer John, Kelly, Fred, or Linda. They were designations, units, pieces of a greater whole. The confusion and fear of their abduction gradually gave way to the rigid structure of their new existence, a relentless regimen of physical and mental conditioning under the unyielding gaze of Chief Petty Officer Mendez and the ever-present analytical eye of Dr. Halsey. Operation Kaleidoscope in its entirety was a testament to ONI's capacity for extreme measures and Dr. Halsey's unwavering conviction. It was the necessary, horrifying precursor to the biological augmentations, the phase that had plucked humanity's chosen few from their unsuspecting lives and delivered them to the crucible of Reach. These 75 children, now stripped of their pasts and imbued with a new, terrifying destiny, stood at the precipice of an irreversible transformation. The desperate hour had demanded a price, and humanity, through the cold calculus of Halsey and the ruthless efficiency of ONI, had paid it in stolen innocence. The stage was now set for the most controversial and perilous phase of the Spartan-II program, where the children would undergo the irreversible physical and neurological changes that would elevate them beyond mere humans, transforming them into something entirely new, something designed to face the impossible. The 75 children, plucked from their unsuspecting lives with surgical precision, arrived on Reach not as individuals, but as cargo of immense, terrifying value. Their journey to the heavily fortified FLETCOM military complex was a blur of disorientation, a sequence of hushed transitions between unmarked transports and sterile, brightly lit corridors. For minds accustomed to the familiar warmth of home, the sudden immersion into this cold, alien environment was a profound shock. The air hummed with the indistinct thrum of advanced machinery, the scent was a clinical blend of antiseptic and recycled oxygen, and the omnipresent, stoic faces of the ONI personnel offered clinical reassurance but no genuine comfort. Fear, a primal, disorienting terror, was the first emotion to coalesce in their young hearts, swiftly followed by an overwhelming sense of abandonment. Upon their arrival at the sprawling training facility, nestled deep within Reach's mountainous interior, the process of stripping away their former identities commenced with chilling efficiency. Their civilian clothing was removed, replaced by drab, utilitarian uniforms identical for every child. Their meager personal belongings, if any had remained with them during the clandestine transit, were confiscated, disappearing into the vast, impersonal archives of ONI. Most profoundly, their names, the very essence of their individuality, were systematically erased. From that moment forward, they were identified by numerical designations, John 1:17, Kelly 0:87, Fred 1:4, Linda, Samuel 0:34, Kurt 0:51, and so on. This act was not merely administrative, it was a deliberate psychological severing of their ties to the past, a fundamental step in molding them into a collective, unified force. They were no longer the beloved children of families across human space. They were now Spartans, nascent instruments of humanity's desperate will. The initial days and weeks were a crucible of confusion and relentless adjustment. The children, still reeling from the abrupt rupture of their lives, found themselves subjected to an entirely new existence governed by rigid schedules, strict discipline, and an incomprehensible array of new rules. They ate together in silent mess halls, slept in Spartan barracks, and moved through their new world under the constant, watchful eyes of ONI staff and military instructors. There was no room for questions, no opportunity for rebellion, and no avenue for escape. Their fear, however intense, was met not with sympathy, but with an unyielding expectation of obedience and adaptation. Gradually, through sheer repetition and the overwhelming force of their new reality, the initial terror began to recede, replaced by a nascent, almost instinctive, understanding of their new purpose, survival within this meticulously constructed environment. At the heart of this transformative phase stood Chief Petty Officer Franklin Mendez. A man forged in the fires of countless conflicts, Mendez possessed an unparalleled understanding of combat, discipline, and the art of pushing human limits. His presence was formidable, his gaze unyielding, and his voice, though rarely raised, carried an absolute authority that brooked no dissent. Mendez was the operational counterpoint to Dr. Halsey's intellectualism, the hardened pragmatist tasked with translating her scientific vision into battlefield reality. He did not concern himself with the ethical dilemmas of their abduction. His singular focus was to forge these children into the most effective fighting force humanity had ever seen. Mendez's training regimen was brutal, designed to systematically break down any lingering civilian habits and rebuild the children from the ground up. Physical conditioning pushed their young bodies to the absolute brink of endurance, demanding feats of strength, speed, and agility that would have been impossible for unaugmented adults. They ran for miles, climbed impossible obstacles, performed endless calisthenics, and engaged in sparring matches that were far more intense than any playground brawl. Each failure was met not with punishment, but with renewed insistence, a quiet, unyielding pressure to perform better, to push harder. Mendez taught them that pain was merely information, fatigue a challenge to be overcome, and personal limits a construct to be shattered. Beyond the physical, Mendez instilled in them an ironclad discipline and an unshakable tactical acumen. They were immersed in simulated combat scenarios, learning close-quarters battle, small-unit tactics, and weapons proficiency with a speed that astonished their instructors. They studied military history, xenolinguistics, and advanced physics, their prodigious intellects absorbing complex data with astonishing ease. Every lesson, every exercise, every moment of their waking lives was designed to cultivate instantaneous decision-making, perfect situational awareness, and an absolute commitment to the mission. The goal was to eliminate any vestige of their former lives, replacing civilian identities with a singular, unwavering purpose, to become Spartans. Dr. Catherine Halsey, while maintaining a scientific detachment, was deeply, personally invested in every aspect of their development. Her presence was less overt than Mendez's, often observing from behind one-way glass or reviewing meticulously compiled psychological and physiological data. Yet her influence permeated every aspect of their existence. She personally designed their educational curricula, ensuring that their intellectual growth matched their physical prowess. She oversaw their psychological assessments, meticulously tracking their adaptation, their resilience, and the subtle shifts in their personalities. Halsey viewed them not as victims, but as humanity's most precious resource, capable of being refined and shaped into its ultimate defense. Her conviction was absolute. Their sacrifice was a necessary down payment on the future of an entire species. The children, stripped of their names and assigned numerical designations, quickly adapted to their new reality. Their young, malleable minds absorbed information at an astonishing rate, and their developing bodies responded with remarkable resilience to the demanding physical regime. The initial fear and confusion, though never entirely forgotten, gradually coalesced into a fierce determination. They found solace and strength not in memories of their past, but in the present, within the shared crucible of their training. They formed bonds not of conventional friendship, but of shared hardship and mutual dependency, a brotherhood and sisterhood forged in the fires of extreme conditioning. They learned to rely on each other implicitly, to anticipate each other's moves, and to operate as an indivisible unit. This profound camaraderie, born of shared trauma and relentless pressure, became the bedrock of their collective identity, a new family forged in the absence of their old. The deliberate erasure of their pasts was a subtle yet constant process. There were no photographs of their families, no personal mementos, no opportunities for communication with the worlds they had left behind. Any attempts to recall or discuss their former lives were gently but firmly redirected, the focus always brought back to the training, to the mission, to their shared future. Dr. Halsey's psychological conditioning was designed to encourage this detachment, to foster a sense that their new lives were the only ones that mattered, and that their destiny was far grander than any they would have found in their original homes. Memories of parents' faces, of childhood games, of familiar landscapes began to fade, becoming distant, hazy echoes against the stark, immediate reality of their Spartan existence. Their identity as children was systematically replaced by their identity as soldiers, as nascent heroes, as humanity's last hope. As the months turned into a year, and then two, the children, now approaching 8 years of age, were no longer merely children in uniform. They were disciplined, intelligent, and incredibly resilient proto-soldiers. Their bodies were honed instruments, their minds sharp and focused. They understood instinctively that they were different, that they were being prepared for something extraordinary, something that transcended the normal bounds of human experience. Whispers and subtle hints, perhaps from older instructors or from their own keen observations, began to circulate about augmentations, procedures that would make them even stronger, even faster, even more resilient. The full implications were beyond their young comprehension, but a sense of profound change, of an irreversible transformation, hung heavy in the air. Dr. Halsey observed their progress with a mixture of scientific fascination and a growing, almost parental pride. She believed she was giving them a purpose far grander than any they would have found in their original lives, a purpose essential for the salvation of humanity. Her conviction was absolute, her resolve unyielding. As the Covenant glassed world after world, the news of humanity's escalating losses, though carefully filtered from the children, only hardened her belief that she was not merely creating soldiers, but building humanity's last, best hope. The children, now unified by shared purpose and an unbreakable bond, stood at the precipice of the next phase, their stolen childhoods a distant memory, their destiny as humanity's shield now irrevocably forged. The stage was now set for the most controversial and perilous phase of the Spartan-II program, where these children would undergo the irreversible physical and neurological changes that would elevate them beyond mere humans, transforming them into something entirely new, something designed to face the impossible. The stage was now set for the most controversial and perilous phase of the Spartan-II program, where these children would undergo the irreversible physical and neurological changes that would elevate them beyond mere humans, transforming them into something entirely new, something designed to face the impossible. As the children, now proto-soldiers forged by 2 years of relentless conditioning, approached their 8th birthdays, a palpable shift occurred within the highly classified facilities en reach. The whispers of augmentations, previously vague and distant, began to materialize into a stark and terrifying reality. Dr. Catherine Halsey, ever the meticulous architect, had meticulously prepared for this moment, designing a battery of surgical procedures and biochemical injections intended to fundamentally rewrite human biology. She had gathered a team of the finest medical minds in the UNSC, specialists in genetics, neurology, and cybernetics, many of whom were kept intentionally compartmentalized, unaware of the true age and origin of their patients. Their task was to perform a series of radical, experimental procedures with a precision and success rate that had never before been achieved on human subjects. The augmentation process was not a single event, but a carefully orchestrated sequence of interventions, each designed to enhance a specific physiological or neurological function. The children were moved from their barracks to sterile, state-of-the-art medical bays, environments of gleaming chrome and humming machinery that stood in stark contrast to the training grounds. Their young bodies, already honed to peak physical condition, were now to be pushed far beyond natural limits. The first series of augmentations focused on the skeletal and muscular systems. The children received injections of the carbide ceramic ossification catalyst, a compound designed to significantly increase the density and resilience of their bones. This procedure made their skeletal structures virtually unbreakable, capable of withstanding impacts that would shatter an unaugmented human. Simultaneously, the muscular enhancement injections were administered, a cocktail of protein complexes and synthetic hormones that drastically accelerated muscle growth and improved the efficiency of muscle fibers. The result was an exponential increase in strength, speed, and endurance, allowing the Spartans to move with astonishing power and agility. These initial procedures were followed by lengthy periods of forced recovery and closely monitored physical therapy, as the children's bodies struggled to adapt to their newfound strength, often experiencing intense pain and disorientation. Next came the neural and ocular enhancements, arguably the most delicate and ethically fraught of the procedures. The occipital capillary reversal was performed, a complex surgery that reversed the flow of blood in the retina, significantly enhancing visual acuity, particularly in low-light conditions. This allowed the Spartans to perceive details and track movement with a clarity and speed far exceeding that of normal humans. Concurrently, the catalytic glandular implants were inserted, small bioengineered glands that boosted the function of the thyroid and adrenal systems. This led to enhanced reaction times, a dramatically increased metabolism, and a heightened capacity for cellular regeneration, allowing them to recover from injuries at an accelerated rate and resist the debilitating effects of fatigue. Perhaps the most profound was the superconducting neural implants, microscopic biocircuits integrated directly into the cerebral cortex. These implants serve to accelerate neural pathways, dramatically improving cognitive processing speed, reflex responses, and the capacity for information retention and recall. They were designed not only to make the Spartans think faster, but also to enable seamless integration with the complex neural interface of the Mjolnir armor. Each of these procedures carried immense risks. Dr. Halsey's research indicated a significant mortality rate, and her predictions proved tragically accurate. Of the 75 children who entered the augmentation phase, 30 died on the operating table or in the immediate aftermath, their young bodies unable to withstand the radical biological restructuring. 12 others were left permanently crippled, suffering from severe neurological damage, paralysis, or irreversible organ failure. These unfortunate casualties were swiftly and silently removed from the program, their existence erased from all but the most highly classified records. Their families, grieving for the flash clones that had succumbed to their engineered ailments, remained blissfully unaware of the true fate of their stolen children. For Dr. Halsey, these losses, while tragic on an individual level, were a cold, statistical inevitability, a necessary culling to ensure the strength and survivability of the remaining cohort. The survival of humanity, she rationalized, demanded such an unyielding sacrifice. The children who survived the augmentations, now numbering a mere 33, emerged from the medical bays forever changed, both physically and psychologically. The recovery period was a prolonged agony, a testament to the brutal invasiveness of the procedures. They endured intense pain, nausea, and disorientation as their bodies struggled to integrate the radical alterations. Yet even in their suffering, their enhanced resilience was evident. They healed faster, adapted quicker, and slowly but surely began to harness the incredible power coursing through their veins. They felt stronger faster, their senses sharpened to an almost overwhelming degree. Sounds were louder, colors more vibrant, and their thoughts raced with an unprecedented clarity. They had transcended the limits of human physiology, becoming something entirely new, something more. Chief Petty Officer Mendez, ever the pragmatist, was quick to adapt the training regimen to their newly augmented forms. The physical conditioning, once thought to be at its peak, was now intensified to an unimaginable degree, designed to push their enhanced bodies even further. They learned to control their prodigious strength, to channel their accelerated reflexes, and to leverage their heightened senses in combat. Sparring matches became more brutal, often involving unaugmented instructors struggling to keep pace with their young charges. The Spartans moved with an almost supernatural grace and speed, their every movement precise and devastating. They broke records, shattered expectations, and demonstrated a capacity for physical prowess that defied all previous human understanding. The tactical training also evolved dramatically. They were introduced to more complex weapon systems, mastering advanced ballistics, energy weapons, and demolition techniques with astonishing proficiency. Their enhanced cognitive abilities allowed them to process battlefield data, analyze enemy movements, and formulate counter-strategies with lightning speed. Simulated combat scenarios became more realistic, pitting them against increasingly sophisticated AI opponents and even live, unaugmented UNSC Special Forces teams, who were invariably overwhelmed by the Spartans' sheer speed and power. They engaged in extensive close-quarters combat training, learning to utilize their augmented strength to maximum effect, transforming their bodies into living weapons. Zero-gravity combat, underwater demolitions, and stealth infiltration techniques became standard parts of their curriculum, pushing them into every conceivable combat environment. Dr. Halsey continued her meticulous oversight, observing their progress with a mixture of scientific fascination and a growing, almost maternal, pride. She was not merely interested in their combat effectiveness, but in the full spectrum of their intellectual and psychological development. Their educational curricula expanded to include advanced astrophysics, covenant xenolinguistics, orbital mechanics, and complex geopolitical strategy. She conducted regular psychological evaluations, tracking their emotional responses, their decision-making processes, and their evolving sense of self. She noted a profound, almost symbiotic, bond forming among the surviving Spartans, a collective identity forged in shared trauma and extraordinary achievement. They were no longer individuals in the traditional sense. They were a unit, an unbreakable shield, each member an indispensable part of the whole. A critical phase of this advanced training involved their introduction to the nascent Mjolnir-powered assault armor system. While the full, functional suits were still in development, the Spartans began training with prototype components and sophisticated virtual reality simulations. They learned to interface with the armor's complex neural links, to interpret its telemetry, and to anticipate its power demands. The armor, designed by Halsey herself, was not merely protective gear. It was an extension of their augmented bodies, a force multiplier that would amplify their already superhuman abilities to an unprecedented degree. The Spartans, with their superconducting neural implants, were the only human beings capable of fully utilizing Mjolnir's capabilities without suffering severe, even fatal, physiological trauma. This symbiotic relationship between soldier and armor was the ultimate expression of Halsey's vision, creating a weapon system unlike any other in history. The years of relentless training, the brutal augmentations, and the constant psychological conditioning had irrevocably transformed these children. By the time they were in their early teens, the Spartans were no longer recognizable as the innocent children abducted years prior. Their bodies were living fortresses of muscle and reinforced bone, their minds razor-sharp instruments of war, and their wills unyielding. Their innocence had been sacrificed, replaced by an absolute dedication to duty, a profound loyalty to their comrades, and an unwavering resolve to protect humanity. They had been stripped of their pasts, molded into a collective identity, and instilled with a singular, terrifying purpose: to fight the Covenant. The outside galaxy, meanwhile, continued its inexorable descent into chaos. Colony after colony fell, humanity's defensive lines crumbled, and the Covenant's genocidal campaign showed no signs of abating. The UNSC was in retreat, desperate for any advantage, any hope. The Spartans, now fully formed and ready, were humanity's answer. They were the impossible made real, the desperate measure born of the direst hour. Their quiet history, etched in sacrifice and moral compromise, was about to become the thunderous roar of humanity's defiance. The time for training was over. The time for war had arrived, and these 33 super soldiers, humanity's most controversial and potent weapon, were finally ready to be unleashed. The stage was now set for the most controversial and perilous phase of the Spartan-II program, where these children would undergo the irreversible physical and neurological changes that would elevate them beyond mere humans, transforming them into something entirely new, something designed to face the impossible. The journey into the augmentation phase was not a sudden plunge, but a deliberate, slow immersion into a new kind of terror. The children, now preteens whose bodies had been sculpted by years of relentless training, were systematically moved from the familiar, albeit Spartan, barracks into the stark, sterile environment of the medical facilities. These were not the infirmaries of their civilian lives, but vast, gleaming surgical theaters and recovery wards, filled with an unsettling array of advanced machinery, flickering diagnostic screens, and the hushed, efficient movements of medical personnel encased in sterile scrubs. The air itself was different, heavy with the scent of antiseptics and the faint, metallic tang of ozone. For the Spartans, accustomed to the raw physicality of their training, this new setting represented a chilling, unknown frontier. Their instructors, even the formidable Chief Petty Officer Mendez, receded into the background, replaced by a phalanx of doctors and nurses whose faces, though professional, often carried an unspoken burden. Dr. Catherine Halsey was a constant, almost spectral, presence within these medical bays. She moved with an unhurried grace, her gaze analytical and penetrating, overseeing every aspect of the procedures. Her involvement was not merely supervisory. She was the principal architect of the augmentations, having designed each compound, each surgical technique, each step of the intricate process. For Halsey, these children were not merely patients. They were the living embodiment of her life's work, the final, most crucial variable in an equation designed for humanity's survival. Her conviction remained absolute, even as she witnessed the immense suffering her designs inflicted. She understood with a cold, scientific clarity that the transformative power of the augmentations came at a brutal cost, a cost she was willing to extract. The augmentations themselves were a series of invasive and profoundly painful procedures, stretched over weeks and months, designed to systematically rewrite the children's biological code. They began with the skeletal system, where the carbide ceramic ossification catalyst was introduced. This compound, delivered through multiple injections and intravenous drips, permeated their bones, instigating a rapid and aggressive increase in bone density. The process was agonizing, described by some survivors as a deep, internal burning, a sensation of their very structure hardening and expanding from within. Their bones, already strong from years of physical conditioning, became virtually impervious, capable of withstanding impacts that would shatter normal human anatomy. The children, sedated but not entirely unconscious for many of these procedures, often thrashed against their restraints, their young bodies convulsing as their skeletal frameworks underwent this radical transformation. Following the ossification, the muscular enhancement injections were administered. This specialized cocktail of synthetic proteins and potent growth hormones targeted their musculature, accelerating the development of muscle fiber and dramatically increasing its efficiency. The children experienced rapid, almost explosive muscle growth, leading to an extraordinary surge in strength and speed. This phase brought with it an intense, pervasive aching, a feeling of muscles tearing and reforming as their bodies struggled to accommodate the sudden increase in mass and power. Their limbs felt heavy, unwieldy, and often spasmed uncontrollably during the initial recovery. The doctors meticulously monitored their vital signs, constantly adjusting dosages, aware that a miscalculation could easily lead to organ failure or catastrophic systemic shock. The neural and ocular enhancements were arguably the most delicate and ethically fraught, delving into the very core of their perception and cognition. The occipital capillary reversal involved intricate microsurgery on the retina, rerouting blood flow to enhance visual acuity. This procedure left the children temporarily blind, their eyes bandaged, their world plunged into darkness, amplifying their disorientation and fear. When the bandages were removed, their vision was overwhelmingly sharp, their perception of light and shadow, color and detail, amplified to an almost painful degree. The world burst forth in a hyperreal kaleidoscope, requiring a lengthy and difficult period of adjustment. Simultaneously, catalytic glandular implants were surgically inserted, tiny bioengineered glands designed to supercharge their thyroid and adrenal systems. This resulted in dramatically enhanced metabolism, accelerated healing, and instantaneous reaction times, pushing their already quick reflexes into the realm of the preternatural. They felt a constant, low-level hum of energy, a heightened state of alertness that could be both exhilarating and exhausting. The final and most crucial augmentation was the integration of superconducting neural implants. This procedure involved the surgical insertion of microscopic biocircuits directly into the cerebral cortex, designed to accelerate neural pathways and facilitate a seamless, direct interface with the Mjolnir armor. This was the most dangerous of all the augmentations, touching the very seat of their consciousness. The risks of neurological damage, cognitive impairment, or even death were immense. For the children who survived, the implants created an unprecedented acceleration of thought, a blurring of the lines between intention and action. Their minds processed information with astonishing speed, their reflexes became instantaneous, and their capacity for multitasking and strategic analysis reached levels previously impossible for humanity. They felt a profound, almost alien, clarity of thought, a quiet hum beneath their consciousness that signaled their fundamental alteration. The high mortality rate of the augmentation process was a grim reality that haunted the sterile corridors of the medical facility. Of the 75 children who entered this phase, 30 perished, their young bodies succumbing to organ rejection, systemic shock, or catastrophic neurological failure. Their deaths were quiet, clinical affairs, their bodies swiftly and discreetly removed, their existence erased from all but the most highly classified logs. Another 12 were left permanently disabled, their minds broken, their bodies crippled, relegated to a silent, forgotten existence within ONI's deepest facilities. These casualties were, in Halsey's cold calculus, acceptable losses, a necessary sifting to ensure the unparalleled quality of the remaining cohort. The families, mourning the flash clones that had withered away from their manufactured illnesses, remained tragically ignorant of the true fate of their stolen children, their grief a carefully constructed deception. For the 33 survivors, the immediate aftermath of the augmentations was a period of profound physical and psychological trauma. They awoke to bodies that were both familiar and entirely alien, racked with pain, yet possessed of an undeniable, terrifying power. Their senses were overwhelmed, their movements uncoordinated, their internal equilibrium shattered. The recovery wards became a new kind of training ground, where highly specialized medical teams and physical therapists pushed them through grueling rehabilitation exercises. They had to learn to walk, to run, to fight all over again, but this time with bodies that defied natural laws. Muscles that had grown too quickly needed to be controlled, senses that were too sharp needed to be modulated, and minds that raced too fast needed to be disciplined. The psychological impact of this brutal transformation was immense. The augmentations served as the final, irreversible severance from their former humanity. They were no longer merely children who had been trained as soldiers. they were now biologically distinct entities, fundamentally altered, set apart. The shared trauma forged their bonds even deeper, transforming their camaraderie into an unbreakable, almost instinctual unity. They were a collective, a brotherhood and sisterhood bound by a shared, terrifying secret. They were no longer entirely human. This realization, however unsettling, was tempered by the constant reinforcement of their purpose. They were humanity's shield, its last, best hope against an existential threat. Dr. Halsey, in her periodic visits, reiterated this purpose, her words a subtle form of psychological conditioning, reinforcing their identity as Spartans, as saviors. The augmentations were not an end in themselves, but a means to an even greater end, the seamless integration with the Mjolnir-powered assault armor. The specific biological and neurological changes inflicted upon the children were meticulously designed to make them the only human beings capable of fully utilizing the armor's immense capabilities. The carbide ceramic ossification catalyst ensured their skeletal structures could withstand the immense kinetic energy feedback generated by the armor's servos and energy shields. The muscular enhancement injections provided the raw strength necessary to move within the heavy, multi-ton suit with speed and agility. The occipital capillary reversal and catalytic glandular implants allowed their senses and reaction times to keep pace with the armor's advanced targeting and sensor systems. Most critically, the superconducting neural implants provided the direct, instantaneous neural interface, allowing the Spartan's mind to control the armor as if it were an extension of their own body, without suffering the paralyzing feedback and systemic shock that would incapacitate or kill an unaugmented wearer. As the surviving 33 Spartans emerged from their recovery, their bodies now living fortresses of muscle and reinforced bone, their minds razor-sharp instruments of war, and their wills unyielding, they were ready for the next phase. Their innocence had been sacrificed, replaced by an absolute dedication to duty, a profound loyalty to their comrades, and an unwavering resolve to protect humanity. They had been stripped of their pasts, molded into a collective identity, and instilled with a singular, terrifying purpose: to fight the Covenant. The outside galaxy, meanwhile, continued its inexorable descent into chaos, colony after colony falling, humanity's defensive lines crumbling. The UNSC was in retreat, desperate for any advantage, any hope. The Spartans, now fully formed and ready, were humanity's answer. They were the impossible made real, the desperate measure born of the direst hour. Their quiet history, etched in sacrifice and moral compromise, was about to become the thunderous roar of humanity's defiance. The time for training was over. The time for war had arrived, and these 33 super soldiers, humanity's most controversial and potent weapon, were finally ready to be unleashed. The stage was now set for the most controversial and perilous phase of the Spartan-II program, where these children would undergo the irreversible physical and neurological changes that would elevate them beyond mere humans, transforming them into something entirely new, something designed to face the impossible. With the augmentations complete, the surviving 33 Spartans stood at the precipice of their true calling. Their bodies, now living fortresses of muscle and reinforced bone, their minds razor-sharp instruments of war, and their wills unyielding, were poised for the ultimate integration, the Mjolnir-powered assault armor. This armor, a marvel of human ingenuity and Dr. Halsey's singular vision, was not merely a suit of protection. It was the final, indispensable component of the super soldier system, designed to elevate their already superhuman abilities to truly godlike levels. Without it, even the augmented Spartans, formidable as they were, could not hope to bridge the vast technological chasm separating humanity from the Covenant. Mjolnir was the amplifier, the shield, the weapon, and ultimately, the icon that would become synonymous with humanity's enduring, desperate hope. The development of the Mjolnir system was a protracted and immensely expensive undertaking, initiated by Dr. Halsey years before the Covenant War, specifically to complement the potential of her nascent Spartan-II program. It represented the pinnacle of human materials science, kinetic energy manipulation, and neural interface technology. The project consumed vast amounts of ONI's black budget, drawing upon the expertise of hundreds of the brightest engineers, physicists, and materials scientists, many of whom worked in isolated, compartmentalized teams, unaware of the full scope or true purpose of their contributions. The challenges were immense, bordering on insurmountable. Creating a suit that could withstand direct plasma impacts, amplify human strength by orders of magnitude, and respond with instantaneous precision to thought commands required breakthroughs in almost every scientific discipline. At its core, Mjolnir was constructed from a multi-layered composite alloy, primarily a titanium ceramic outer shell reinforced with a reactive metal liquid crystal layer. This exotic material possessed unparalleled tensile strength and resistance to extreme temperatures, allowing it to shrug off most conventional ballistic fire and even absorb significant plasma energy before structural compromise. Beneath this formidable exterior lay a complex network of force-multiplying servos and artificial muscle fibers, powered by a miniaturized fusion reactor embedded in the suit's back. These systems translated the wearer's movements into amplified actions, allowing a Spartan to lift several tons, sprint at speeds exceeding 60 kilometers per hour, and leap incredible distances. The suit was designed to move with such fluidity and power that it became a seamless extension of the Spartan's own body, responding to every twitch and impulse with unerring accuracy. However, the true marvel of Mjolnir and its most critical feature against the Covenant was its integrated energy shielding. This technology, reverse-engineered from captured Covenant plasma weapons and energy projectors, was a revolutionary breakthrough. A semi-permeable energy field, generated by emitters embedded throughout the suit, enveloped the Spartan, deflecting incoming plasma bolts and kinetic projectiles. This shield system, visually manifesting as a shimmering distortion around the wearer, could absorb an incredible amount of damage before collapsing, buying precious seconds for the Spartan to react, reposition, or engage. Without these shields, even the reinforced bones and muscles of a Spartan would be quickly vaporized by Covenant plasma fire. The integration of this shielding technology was a game-changer, fundamentally altering the dynamics of ground combat against a technologically superior foe. The Mjolnir helmet, a distinctive feature of the armor, was a self-contained tactical command center. Its multi-layered visor, crafted from a polarized, refractive material, provided unparalleled optical protection and an advanced heads-up display, or HUD. This HUD interfaced directly with the Spartan's superconducting neural implants, overlaying critical battlefield data, motion tracking, threat indicators, weapon telemetry, and communication protocols directly onto their field of vision. High-resolution cameras, thermal imagers, and passive radar sensors embedded in the helmet provided comprehensive situational awareness, allowing the Spartan to perceive threats and opportunities that would be invisible to unaugmented soldiers. Integrated comm systems allowed for encrypted, real-time communication with command and fellow Spartans, fostering an unparalleled level of tactical coordination. The suit also incorporated a sophisticated environmental sealing system, allowing Spartans to operate unhindered in vacuum, extreme temperatures, toxic atmospheres, and underwater environments. Life support systems provided breathable air, regulated temperature, and recycled waste, sustaining the Spartan for extended periods in hostile conditions. Magnetic weapon hardpoints on the armor allowed for rapid weapon exchange and secure storage, while a complex array of thrusters and gyroscopes aided in maneuverability, especially in zero-gravity combat. Every square centimeter of the Mjolnir armor was a testament to humanity's desperate ingenuity, a meticulously engineered response to an existential threat. The symbiotic relationship between the Mjolnir armor and the augmented Spartans was the bedrock of its effectiveness. The superconducting neural implants, surgically integrated into the Spartan's cerebral cortex, were the crucial link. They allowed for a direct, instantaneous neural interface with the suit's complex systems. An unaugmented human attempting to wear Mjolnir would be instantly paralyzed or killed by the sheer force feedback and overwhelming data stream generated by the suit. Their unenhanced nervous systems could not process the information, nor could their bodies withstand the kinetic stresses. Only the Spartans, with their accelerated neural pathways, reinforced skeletal structures, and enhanced muscular systems, could survive the suit's demands and fully exploit its capabilities. The armor was literally an extension of their will, a second skin that amplified their every thought and movement, blurring the line between man and machine. For the 33 surviving Spartans, the introduction to their Mjolnir suits was a moment of profound transformation. After years of brutal training and agonizing augmentations, they were finally presented with the tools that would complete their metamorphosis. The suits, custom-fitted and meticulously calibrated to each Spartan's unique physiology, were more than just equipment. They were their destiny made manifest. The first time a Spartan activated their Mjolnir armor, the hum of the fusion reactor, the faint crackle of the energy shields, and the sudden, exhilarating surge of amplified strength and speed was an experience beyond words. It was the moment they truly became what they were designed to be, humanity's ultimate protectors. The initial deployments of the Mjolnir-equipped Spartans were shrouded in the deepest secrecy, carefully selected to maximize their impact and test the armor's capabilities in live combat scenarios. These were not pitched battles on the front lines, but surgical strikes, infiltration missions, and daring raids deep behind Covenant lines. The results were immediate and devastatingly effective. A single Spartan clad in Mjolnir could turn the tide of a skirmish, eliminate high-value targets, or secure vital intelligence with an efficiency that defied logic. UNSC forces, accustomed to being overwhelmed by Covenant technology, watched in awe as the Spartans, moving with impossible speed and shrugging off plasma fire, carved through enemy formations. The psychological impact on both sides was immense. For the UNSC, the Spartans were a living embodiment of hope, a tangible sign that humanity could, in fact, fight back. For the Covenant, they were an anomaly, a terrifying new threat that defied their established tactical doctrines and instilled a rare, unsettling sense of fear. As news of their impossible feats began to filter through the ranks, albeit heavily censored and embellished by ONI propaganda, the Spartans in their gleaming Mjolnir armor quickly became a powerful icon for a desperate humanity. To the public, they were not stolen children, but heroic volunteers, paragons of courage and technological might. The image of the armored Spartan, standing defiant against overwhelming odds, became a potent symbol of resilience and determination. They were the spearhead of humanity's defiance, the quiet answer to the Covenant's genocidal roar. Their very existence, even if shrouded in myth and misinformation, buoyed public morale and provided a much-needed focal point for hope amidst the relentless cascade of defeats. They were the miracle humanity had prayed for, a tangible promise that the war was not yet lost. Yet beneath this public facade of heroism and technological triumph, the quiet history of the Spartans remained a dark secret. Dr. Halsey, observing her creations from afar, understood the profound moral compromise that had birthed them. She saw not just the soldiers, but the children they once were, their stolen innocence now encased in titanium and energy shields. Her pride in their achievements was tempered by the chilling awareness of the price paid, a price that only she and a select few truly comprehended. The Mjolnir armor, for all its glory, was a testament to humanity's capacity for both unparalleled innovation and profound ethical depravity. It was a shield forged in the fires of extinction, powered by the sacrifice of childhoods, and destined to become the most potent and tragic symbol of a war for survival. The Mjolnir system, like the Spartans themselves, was not static. Its development continued throughout the war, leading to different iterations and specialized variants, each building upon the foundational design. Mark V, Mark VI, and later generations introduced further refinements in shielding, power generation, and neural interface capabilities, ensuring that the Spartans remained at the cutting edge of human military technology. Each upgrade was a testament to the ongoing desperation and the relentless pursuit of an edge, however small, against an enemy that offered no quarter. The armor was constantly being pushed to its limits, tested and refined in the crucible of galactic warfare, just as the Spartans themselves were. Thus, the Mjolnir-powered assault armor emerged not merely as a piece of equipment, but as a legend in its own right. It was the physical manifestation of humanity's will to survive, an impenetrable shell that housed the fierce, unyielding spirit of the Spartans. It was the icon of hope, the thunderous roar that finally answered the Covenant's genocidal intent. The children, now super soldiers clad in this formidable armor, were ready to be unleashed, their quiet history of sacrifice about to become the loudest, most defiant chapter in humanity's fight for existence. The war had arrived, and the Spartans in their Mjolnir were humanity's last, best hope, ready to face the impossible. The time for training was over. The time for war had arrived, and these 33 super soldiers, humanity's most controversial and potent weapon, were finally ready to be unleashed. Their first taste of combat, however, was not against the alien menace that now threatened humanity's very existence, but against the very internal enemy that had necessitated their creation in the first place, the insurrection. The Covenant War, while raging across the outer colonies, had not yet fully engulfed the inner systems, and the UNSC still grappled with the persistent, festering wounds of civil strife. For Dr. Halsey and ONI, these initial deployments served a dual purpose: to validate the Spartan-II Program's efficacy against the most immediate, albeit secondary, threat, and to provide invaluable live-fire experience for the young Spartans before committing them to the truly existential conflict. The initial missions were surgical, precise, and shrouded in absolute secrecy. ONI Section 3 hand-picked targets of critical importance to the insurrection, focusing on leadership figures, key logistical hubs, and heavily fortified rebel strongholds that had proven impregnable to conventional UNSC forces. These were not large-scale engagements designed to reclaim territory, but rather decapitation strikes and high-impact operations intended to destabilize rebel networks and demonstrate a new, terrifying level of UNSC capability. The Spartans, clad in their gleaming Mjolnir armor, were deployed as impossibly fast, impossibly strong instruments of war, appearing and disappearing like phantoms, leaving behind a trail of calculated devastation. One of their earliest documented missions, though heavily redacted, involved the swift dismantling of a prominent insurrectionist cell on the colony world of Eridanus II. This cell, led by a charismatic and elusive figure known only as the Governor, had been responsible for numerous acts of terror and sabotage against UNSC assets for years. Conventional efforts to apprehend him had repeatedly failed, resulting in significant UNSC casualties. A single Spartan team, numbering just 4 individuals, was inserted covertly into the densely populated urban center. Moving with an unearthly silence and speed, their Mjolnir armor a blur of titanium and energy shields, they bypassed multiple layers of rebel security, neutralized heavily armed guards with non-lethal precision, and apprehended the Governor in his supposedly impenetrable safe house within minutes. The entire operation, from insertion to extraction, took less than an hour, leaving local UNSC forces stunned by the sheer efficiency and devastating effectiveness of their new assets. The psychological impact on the insurrectionist networks was profound. Suddenly, no leader, no stronghold felt truly secure. Another notable early deployment involved the rescue of high-value UNSC hostages from a heavily fortified rebel prison facility on the asteroid belt of the rubble. This operation was deemed impossible by conventional military planners, requiring a frontal assault that would undoubtedly result in the deaths of the hostages. Again, a small Spartan team was deployed. Utilizing their Mjolnir's advanced stealth capabilities and their own augmented strength, they breached the facility's multiple layers of defenses, engaging and neutralizing dozens of rebel combatants without suffering a single casualty. The hostages were extracted unharmed, and the prison facility was left in ruins, a testament to the Spartans' destructive power. These missions, executed with chilling precision and overwhelming force, quickly established the Spartans as an unparalleled force multiplier against human adversaries. Their very presence on a battlefield, even if unknown to the enemy, shifted the tactical balance dramatically. The experience of fighting human enemies, however, was not without its own subtle, internal complexities for the Spartans. While their psychological conditioning had instilled an unwavering loyalty to the UNSC and a detached focus on mission parameters, they were still, at their core, human. They perceived the fear in the eyes of their opponents, the desperation in their last stands, and the all-too-familiar tactics employed by their own species. This was a different kind of war than the one they were being prepared for, one that highlighted the profound, almost tragic irony of their existence. Super soldiers created to fight humanity's internal enemies, now poised to face an external one that rendered all internal conflicts moot. Yet their conditioning held. They executed their orders without hesitation, their focus absolute, their understanding of the greater good unyielding. For them, the mission was everything. For Dr. Halsey and the high command of ONI, these early deployments against the insurrection were a resounding success. They validated the immense investment, the ethical compromises, and the brutal training. The Spartans proved to be exactly what Halsey had envisioned, a small team of individuals capable of turning the tide in seemingly unwinnable situations. The successes against the insurrection provided a crucial, albeit temporary, respite for the UNSC, allowing them to redirect some resources towards the escalating Covenant threat. The public, largely unaware of the Spartans' true nature or their specific missions, received carefully crafted propaganda about elite special forces achieving impossible victories, bolstering morale in an increasingly grim war. However, the relative calm of insurrectionist engagements was a fleeting illusion, a brief prelude to the true terror that awaited them. As the Covenant War escalated with horrifying rapidity, glassing colony after colony, the strategic imperative shifted dramatically. The internal squabbles of humanity, once seemingly paramount, were now utterly overshadowed by the looming specter of total annihilation. The UNSC High Command, in a desperate gambit, began to retask the Spartan-II Program, shifting its focus entirely from human rebels to the genocidal alien alliance. The Spartans, originally conceived as counterinsurgency tools, were now humanity's last, best hope against an enemy that offered no quarter. The transition to fighting the Covenant was abrupt and brutal. The Spartans, having honed their skills against human adversaries, were now thrust into a conflict of unimaginable scale and lethality. Their first encounters with the Covenant were a stark and terrifying revelation. Gone were the familiar ballistics and conventional tactics of human warfare. In their place were plasma weaponry that vaporized flesh and metal, energy shields that shrugged off sustained fire, and alien physiologies that defied conventional understanding. The technological disparity, which Mjolnir was designed to mitigate, was still immense, and the Covenant's numerical superiority was overwhelming. One of the earliest and most critical deployments against the Covenant occurred during the fall of Sigma Octantis IV in 2526. This was a pivotal moment for the Spartans, their first true test against the alien foe. A Covenant fleet had descended upon the planet, threatening to glass its vital industrial infrastructure. While conventional UNSC forces fought a valiant but ultimately losing defensive battle, a single Spartan team, including John 117, was tasked with a critical mission: to retrieve a Covenant data chip from a downed cruiser before the aliens could destroy it. This chip was believed to contain vital intelligence about Covenant fleet movements and technology. Landing amidst the chaos of a planet under siege, the Spartans immediately encountered the terrifying efficiency of the Covenant war machine. Plasma fire streaked across the battlefield, energy shields flared on alien warriors, and the air thrummed with the alien language of their foes. Their Mjolnir armor, while providing unprecedented protection, was pushed to its absolute limits. Plasma bolts previously absorbed by their shields now caused visible energy drain, and sustained fire could collapse them entirely, leaving the Spartans vulnerable. They learned quickly that direct, prolonged engagements were suicidal, even for them. Instead, they relied on their augmented speed, their tactical prowess, and the sheer destructive power of Mjolnir to execute precision strikes, exploiting weaknesses in Covenant formations and targeting high-value assets. During the Sigma Octanus IV mission, John 1:17 and his team demonstrated the Spartans' unparalleled effectiveness. They moved through the ravaged cityscapes with impossible agility, engaging Sangheli elites in close-quarters combat, deflecting plasma with their shields, and utilizing their enhanced strength to overcome foes that would easily overpower unaugmented soldiers. They breached the Covenant cruiser, battling through hordes of Ungoi, grunts, Kigyar jackals, and Sangheli, facing down energy swords and plasma rifles with unwavering resolve. The retrieval of the data chip was a perilous endeavor, but they succeeded, escaping the doomed world with critical intelligence that would prove invaluable to ONI's efforts to understand the Covenant. This mission, though small in scale compared to the overall battle, represented a monumental victory, a tangible sign that humanity could, in fact, fight back and inflict damage on the seemingly invincible enemy. These early Covenant engagements were a brutal education. The Spartans learned to adapt their tactics, focusing on hit-and-run maneuvers, precision targeting of critical enemy systems, and leveraging their Mjolnir's agility to outmaneuver slower, more heavily armed Covenant forces. They discovered that while their shields could absorb plasma, sustained fire was dangerous, and energy swords were still a lethal threat. They quickly understood the importance of coordinated fire, of focusing their collective power on a single target, and of exploiting environmental factors to their advantage. They became masters of asymmetrical warfare, turning the Covenant's own overwhelming numbers and brute force against them through cunning, speed, and devastatingly effective strikes. The strategic impact of these early Spartan deployments against the Covenant was immense, far outweighing their small numbers. They could not win the war alone, nor could they reclaim entire planets, but they could achieve critical objectives that conventional forces simply could not. They bought precious time, retrieved vital intelligence, disrupted Covenant operations, and most importantly, provided undeniable proof that humanity possessed a weapon capable of standing against the alien tide. For the struggling UNSC, the Spartans were a desperate, glimmering beacon of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. Their existence, though shrouded in layers of secrecy and propaganda, began to inspire a renewed sense of defiance among the beleaguered human forces. Admiral Margaret Perengoski and Dr. Halsey watched these early successes with a grim satisfaction. The tragic cost of the Spartan-II program, the stolen childhoods and the lives lost during augmentation, was being justified, at least in their utilitarian calculus, by the very survival of the species. The Spartans were proving to be humanity's most effective counter to the Covenant, a testament to Halsey's chillingly pragmatic vision. They were not merely soldiers, they were symbols, weapons, and the quiet, unyielding answer to a genocidal threat. Their quiet history, born of humanity's deepest fear and etched in sacrifice and moral compromise, was now becoming the thunderous roar of defiance that echoed across the galaxy, a desperate hope against an impossible enemy. The war had truly begun, and the Spartans, in their Mjolnir, were at its bleeding edge. The time for training was over. The time for war had arrived, and these 33 super soldiers, humanity's most controversial and potent weapon, were finally ready to be unleashed. Their first taste of combat, however, was not against the alien menace that now threatened humanity's very existence, but against the very internal enemy that had necessitated their creation in the first place, the insurrection. The Covenant War, while raging across the outer colonies, had not yet fully engulfed the inner systems, and the UNSC still grappled with the persistent, festering wounds of civil strife. For Dr. Halsey and ONI, these initial deployments served a dual purpose: to validate the Spartan-II program's efficacy against the most immediate, albeit secondary, threat, and to provide invaluable live-fire experience for the young Spartans before committing them to the truly existential conflict. The initial missions were surgical, precise, and shrouded in absolute secrecy. ONI Section 3 hand-picked targets of critical importance to the insurrection, focusing on leadership figures, key logistical hubs, and heavily fortified rebel strongholds that had proven impregnable to conventional UNSC forces. These were not large-scale engagements designed to reclaim territory, but rather decapitation strikes and high-impact operations intended to destabilize rebel networks and demonstrate a new, terrifying level of UNSC capability. The Spartans, clad in their gleaming Mjolnir armor, were deployed as impossibly fast, impossibly strong instruments of war, appearing and disappearing like phantoms, leaving behind a trail of calculated devastation. One of their earliest documented missions, though heavily redacted, involved the swift dismantling of a prominent insurrectionist cell on the colony world of Eridanus II. This cell, led by a charismatic and elusive figure known only as the Governor, had been responsible for numerous acts of terror and sabotage against UNSC assets for years. Conventional efforts to apprehend him had repeatedly failed, resulting in significant UNSC casualties. A single Spartan team, numbering just 4 individuals, was inserted covertly into the densely populated urban center. Moving with an unearthly silence and speed, their Mjolnir armor a blur of titanium and energy shields, they bypassed multiple layers of rebel security, neutralized heavily armed guards with non-lethal precision, and apprehended the Governor in his supposedly impenetrable safe house within minutes. The entire operation, from insertion to extraction, took less than an hour, leaving local UNSC forces stunned by the sheer efficiency and devastating effectiveness of their new assets. The psychological impact on the insurrectionist networks was profound. Suddenly, no leader, no stronghold felt truly secure. Another notable early deployment involved the rescue of high-value UNSC hostages from a heavily fortified rebel prison facility on the asteroid belt of the rubble. This operation was deemed impossible by conventional military planners, requiring a frontal assault that would undoubtedly result in the deaths of the hostages. Again, a small Spartan team was deployed. Utilizing their Mjolnir's advanced stealth capabilities and their own augmented strength, they breached the facility's multiple layers of defenses, engaging and neutralizing dozens of rebel combatants without suffering a single casualty. The hostages were extracted unharmed, and the prison facility was left in ruins, a testament to the Spartans' destructive power. These missions, executed with chilling precision and overwhelming force, quickly established the Spartans as an unparalleled force multiplier against human adversaries. Their very presence on a battlefield, even if unknown to the enemy, shifted the tactical balance dramatically. The experience of fighting human enemies, however, was not without its own subtle, internal complexities for the Spartans. While their psychological conditioning had instilled an unwavering loyalty to the UNSC and a detached focus on mission parameters, they were still, at their core, human. They perceived the fear in the eyes of their opponents, the desperation in their last stands, and the all-too-familiar tactics employed by their own species. This was a different kind of war than the one they were being prepared for, one that highlighted the profound, almost tragic irony of their existence. Super soldiers created to fight humanity's internal enemies, now poised to face an external one that rendered all internal conflicts moot. Yet their conditioning held. They executed their orders without hesitation, their focus absolute, their understanding of the greater good unyielding. For them, the mission was everything. For Dr. Halsey and the high command of ONI, these early deployments against the insurrection were a resounding success. They validated the immense investment, the ethical compromises, and the brutal training. The Spartans proved to be exactly what Halsey had envisioned, a small team of individuals capable of turning the tide in seemingly unwinnable situations. The successes against the insurrection provided a crucial, albeit temporary, respite for the UNSC, allowing them to redirect some resources towards the escalating Covenant threat. The public, largely unaware of the Spartans' true nature or their specific missions, received carefully crafted propaganda about elite special forces achieving impossible victories, bolstering morale in an increasingly grim war. However, the relative calm of insurrectionist engagements was a fleeting illusion, a brief prelude to the true terror that awaited them. As the Covenant War escalated with horrifying rapidity, glassing colony after colony, the strategic imperatives shifted dramatically. The internal squabbles of humanity, once seemingly paramount, were now utterly overshadowed by the looming specter of total annihilation. The UNSC High Command, in a desperate gambit, began to retask the Spartan-II Program, shifting its focus entirely from human rebels to the genocidal alien alliance. The Spartans, originally conceived as counterinsurgency tools, were now humanity's last, best hope against an enemy that offered no quarter. The transition to fighting the Covenant was abrupt and brutal. The Spartans, having honed their skills against human adversaries, were now thrust into a conflict of unimaginable scale and lethality. Their first encounters with the Covenant were a stark and terrifying revelation. Gone were the familiar ballistics and conventional tactics of human warfare. In their place were plasma weaponry that vaporized flesh and metal, energy shields that shrugged off sustained fire, and alien physiologies that defied conventional understanding. The technological disparity, which Mjolnir was designed to mitigate, was still immense, and the Covenant's numerical superiority was overwhelming. One of the earliest and most critical deployments against the Covenant occurred during the fall of Sigma Octantis IV in 2526. This was a pivotal moment for the Spartans, their first true test against the alien foe. A Covenant fleet had descended upon the planet, threatening to glass its vital industrial infrastructure. While conventional UNSC forces fought a valiant but ultimately losing defensive battle, a single Spartan team, including John 117, was tasked with a critical mission: to retrieve a Covenant data chip from a downed cruiser before the aliens could destroy it. This chip was believed to contain vital intelligence about Covenant fleet movements and technology. Landing amidst the chaos of a planet under siege, the Spartans immediately encountered the terrifying efficiency of the Covenant war machine. Plasma fire streaked across the battlefield, energy shields flared on alien warriors, and the air thrummed with the alien language of their foes. Their Mjolnir armor, while providing unprecedented protection, was pushed to its absolute limits. Plasma bolts previously absorbed by their shields now caused visible energy drain, and sustained fire could collapse them entirely, leaving the Spartans vulnerable. They learned quickly that direct, prolonged engagements were suicidal, even for them. Instead, they relied on their augmented speed, their tactical prowess, and the sheer destructive power of Mjolnir to execute precision strikes, exploiting weaknesses in Covenant formations and targeting high-value assets. During the Sigma Octantis IV mission, John 117 and his team demonstrated the Spartans' unparalleled effectiveness. They moved through the ravaged cityscapes with impossible agility, engaging Sangheli elites in close-quarters combat, deflecting plasma with their shields, and utilizing their enhanced strength to overcome foes that would easily overpower unaugmented soldiers. They breached the Covenant cruiser, battling through hordes of Ungoi, grunts, Kigyar jackals, and Sangheli, facing down energy swords and plasma rifles with unwavering resolve. The retrieval of the data chip was a perilous endeavor, but they succeeded, escaping the doomed world with critical intelligence that would prove invaluable to ONI's efforts to understand the Covenant. This mission, though small in scale compared to the overall battle, represented a monumental victory, a tangible sign that humanity could, in fact, fight back and inflict damage on the seemingly invincible enemy. These early Covenant engagements were a brutal education. The Spartans learned to adapt their tactics, focusing on hit-and-run maneuvers, precision targeting of critical enemy systems, and leveraging their Mjolnir's agility to outmaneuver slower, more heavily armed Covenant forces. They discovered that while their shields could absorb plasma, sustained fire was dangerous, and energy swords were still a lethal threat. They quickly understood the importance of coordinated fire, of focusing their collective power on a single target, and of exploiting environmental factors to their advantage. They became masters of asymmetrical warfare, turning the Covenant's own overwhelming numbers and brute force against them through cunning, speed, and devastatingly effective strikes. The strategic impact of these early Spartan deployments against the Covenant was immense, far outweighing their small numbers. They could not win the war alone, nor could they reclaim entire planets, but they could achieve critical objectives that conventional forces simply could not. They bought precious time, retrieved vital intelligence, disrupted Covenant operations, and most importantly, provided undeniable proof that humanity possessed a weapon capable of standing against the alien tide. For the struggling UNSC, the Spartans were a desperate, glimmering beacon of hope amidst the encroaching darkness. Their existence, though shrouded in layers of secrecy and propaganda, began to inspire a renewed sense of defiance among the beleaguered human forces. Admiral Margaret Perengoski and Dr. Halsey watched these early successes with a grim satisfaction. The tragic cost of the Spartan-II program, the stolen childhoods and the lives lost during augmentation, was being justified, at least in their utilitarian calculus, by the very survival of the species. The Spartans were proving to be humanity's most effective counter to the Covenant, a testament to Halsey's chillingly pragmatic vision. They were not merely soldiers, they were symbols, weapons, and the quiet, unyielding answer to a genocidal threat. Their quiet history, born of humanity's deepest fear and etched in sacrifice and moral compromise, was now becoming the thunderous roar of defiance that echoed across the galaxy, a desperate hope against an impossible enemy. The war had truly begun, and the Spartans, in their Mjolnir, were at its bleeding edge. As the years bled into a decade, the initial, isolated victories achieved by the Spartans against the Covenant became increasingly vital, yet increasingly overshadowed by the relentless, devastating progress of the alien war machine. The Covenant's advance was an unstoppable tide, consuming colony after colony, world after world. The term glassing became a grim reality, a chilling descriptor for the systematic eradication of human worlds. Earth's burgeoning interstellar empire, once boundless, began to shrink with terrifying speed, its borders contracting under the sustained, genocidal assault. The UNSC, despite the Spartans' heroic efforts, was forced into a desperate, agonizing retreat, implementing a strategic doctrine known as the fallback protocol. This protocol dictated a phased withdrawal from the outer colonies, sacrificing entire systems and billions of lives to buy precious time, to consolidate defenses, and to fortify the inner colonies, particularly the critical military hub of Reach and, ultimately, Earth itself. The psychological toll on humanity was immense. Public morale, buoyed occasionally by heavily censored reports of elite special forces victories, plummeted with each new world lost. Refugee fleets, often overwhelmed and under-equipped, streamed inwards, creating humanitarian crises in the inner colonies already strained by dwindling resources and the lingering economic scars of the insurrection. Fear became a constant companion, a suffocating blanket woven from news of plasma bombardments, civilian massacres, and the eerie silence of worlds that had simply ceased to exist. ONI's efforts to control information became increasingly difficult, as the sheer scale of the conflict made it impossible to suppress all news of the Covenant's atrocities. The political landscape within the UNSC High Command was a maelstrom of desperation, impossible choices, and the crushing weight of command as admirals and generals grappled with the certainty of inevitable defeat. Within this maelstrom, the Spartans' role became even more critical and specialized. They were not designed for planetary defense, nor could their small numbers hope to stem the tide of entire Covenant fleets. Instead, they became humanity's most potent instruments of surgical strike and deep reconnaissance. Their missions were audacious, often suicidal, operating far behind enemy lines, striking at the heart of Covenant operations. They performed deep space infiltrations of Covenant fleets, stealing vital intelligence on alien technology, ship designs, and strategic objectives. They conducted daring assassinations of high-ranking Covenant commanders, disrupting command structures and sowing chaos within the enemy's ranks. They were instrumental in the recovery of critical Forerunner artifacts, preventing the Covenant from acquiring ancient technology they fanatically believed to be divine, and which the UNSC desperately sought to understand and potentially exploit. One such mission saw a Spartan team infiltrate a Covenant-occupied research facility on a remote, icy moon, where the aliens were dissecting a newly discovered Forerunner relic. Moving through blizzard conditions and engaging heavily armed Sangheili guards, the Spartans secured the artifact and extracted it under heavy fire, providing ONI with invaluable data that hinted at the true purpose of the Forerunner civilization. These missions were not about winning battles, but about buying time, gathering intelligence, and inflicting disproportionate damage, 1,000 cuts against a monstrous enemy. They were the scalpel to the UNSC's blunted axe, precise instruments of disruption in a war of attrition. The Covenant, in turn, began to recognize the Spartans as a unique and terrifying threat. Their Mjolnir armor, initially dismissed as crude human technology, proved remarkably resilient, and the sheer combat prowess of the Spartans defied their understanding. The Sangheili particularly developed a grudging respect and intense hatred for these demons, as they came to call them, recognizing their unparalleled skill and the devastating impact they had on Covenant operations. This recognition, however, only fueled the Covenant's genocidal fervor, reinforcing their belief that humanity was an abomination to be purged. As the war progressed, the focus of humanity's defense inevitably shifted to Reach, the UNSC's primary military staging ground, industrial hub, and the last major bastion before Earth. Reach was a fortress world, bristling with orbital defense platforms, ground-based missile batteries, and a massive naval fleet. It was home to the FLETCOM military complex, shipyards, and the highly classified ONI Section 3 facilities, including Dr. Halsey's research lab and the Spartan training complex. The very fate of humanity rested on Reach's ability to hold out against the inevitable Covenant assault. Its loss would not only mean the destruction of the UNSC's primary fleet and industrial capacity, but would also open a direct path to Earth, humanity's homeworld. Dr. Halsey continued her unwavering oversight of the Spartan program, even as the war raged around them. She refined Mjolnir technology, oversaw the development of new armaments, and meticulously analyzed every mission report, constantly seeking ways to enhance her Spartans' effectiveness. Her connection to them, while still clinically detached, deepened with each successful mission, each impossible feat they achieved. She saw them as the only viable solution, the ultimate expression of her chillingly utilitarian philosophy, a small number of super soldiers sacrificing everything for the survival of billions. The Spartans, now veterans of countless engagements against both human and alien foes, were no longer the bewildered children abducted years prior. They were hardened warriors, their bond of brotherhood and sisterhood forged in the crucible of war, their understanding of their purpose absolute. They knew they were different, set apart, destined for a singular, terrifying role in humanity's final stand. Their quiet history, etched in stolen innocence and profound sacrifice, was about to reach its thunderous climax. The defense of Reach, the ultimate test of their training, their augmentations, and their Mjolnir armor, loomed on the horizon. It was a battle they knew they could not afford to lose, for if Reach fell, Earth would be next, and with it, all hope for humanity. The desperate hour had transformed into humanity's last stand, and the Spartans were its shield, its sword, and its last, defiant prayer. Within this maelstrom of galactic conflict and human desperation, where the collective might of the UNSC struggled against the Covenant's relentless tide, certain individuals began to emerge from the anonymity of their numerical designations. While the Spartan-II program was designed to create a unified, unbreakable force, the crucible of war inevitably forged individual legends, warriors whose extraordinary feats transcended mere military reports and became beacons of hope for a beleaguered humanity. These were the Spartans whose names, or more often their designations, began to ripple through the hushed channels of ONI, and in carefully curated whispers, even among the wider UNSC forces, embodying the desperate prayer that humanity could, in fact, fight back. Foremost among these titans was Spartan-117, John, a figure who would come to be known across the galaxy simply as the Master Chief. From his earliest days in training, John exhibited a unique blend of tactical brilliance, an almost preternatural intuition, and an unwavering resolve that set him apart. He possessed an uncanny ability to analyze complex battlefield scenarios in milliseconds, identifying enemy weaknesses and exploiting them with devastating efficiency. His leadership, while often quiet and understated, was absolute, inspiring unwavering loyalty and supreme confidence in his fellow Spartans. John 1:17 was not merely a soldier, he was a force of nature, a living embodiment of humanity's defiance. His Mjolnir armor, initially green, became an iconic silhouette against the backdrop of glassed worlds and shattered fleets, a symbol of hope and an instrument of terror for the Covenant. John's early missions against the insurrection had already showcased his exceptional capabilities, but it was his performance in the brutal engagements against the Covenant that truly cemented his legend. During the fall of Sigma Octantis IV, a mission already mentioned as a pivotal early test, John 1:17 spearheaded the recovery of a crucial Covenant data chip. He demonstrated not only unparalleled combat prowess, single-handedly engaging and defeating multiple Sangheli elites, but also a strategic foresight that allowed his team to navigate impossible odds. This mission, and many others like it, highlighted his capacity for achieving objectives that conventional military doctrine deemed suicidal. He possessed an almost mythical luck, a trait that Dr. Halsey herself noted in her classified journals, a tendency for events to align in his favor, allowing him to survive and succeed where others would inevitably fall. This was not mere chance, however, but rather the culmination of his augmented reflexes, lightning-fast cognitive processing, and an innate, unyielding will to survive and complete the mission. Close to John 1:17, both in combat and in an almost familial bond, was Spartan 087 Kelly. Renowned as the fastest of all the Spartans, Kelly's speed was legendary, her movements a blur even to the enhanced perceptions of her comrades. This unparalleled agility made her an invaluable asset in close-quarters combat, rapid reconnaissance, and critical extraction missions. She could traverse battlefields under heavy fire with astonishing grace, often drawing enemy attention away from her team or securing objectives before the Covenant could react. Her Mjolnir armor was often customized for maximum mobility, reflecting her primary combat doctrine. Kelly's speed was not merely a physical attribute, it was an extension of her quick thinking and decisive action, allowing her to outmaneuver and outthink enemies in engagements where milliseconds determined life or death. She was often John's point woman, the first into danger and the last out, her unwavering loyalty and combat ferocity a constant reassurance to her team. Another pillar of the Spartan-II program was Spartan-I Fred. A natural leader, Fred possessed a tactical mind almost on par with John's, often taking command of other Spartan teams during complex operations. His strength lay not just in his individual combat skills, which were formidable, but in his ability to coordinate and inspire multiple units, orchestrating intricate maneuvers under extreme pressure. Fred was known for his calm demeanor even in the most chaotic battles, his strategic insights often turning the tide of engagements that seemed lost. He was dependable, pragmatic, and utterly dedicated to the survival of his team and the completion of his mission. His leadership was crucial in many holding actions and defensive operations, where his ability to effectively deploy his fellow Spartans and leverage their unique abilities against overwhelming Covenant forces proved indispensable. Then there was Spartan 058 Linda, the Silent Sentinel. Linda was the undisputed master of long-range engagement, an unparalleled sniper whose accuracy bordered on the supernatural. Her enhanced vision, combined with her superconducting neural implants, allowed her to calculate ballistics and environmental factors with astonishing precision, enabling her to make impossible shots from extreme distances. Linda often operated alone or with minimal support, providing critical overwatch and eliminating high-value targets before they could even register her presence. Her stealth capabilities were legendary, allowing her to position herself in vantage points that conventional forces could never reach, remaining undetected for extended periods. She was a ghost in the machine of war, a silent bringer of death to the Covenant, her presence often announced only by the sudden, inexplicable collapse of enemy commanders or critical weapon systems. The brutal reality of the war, however, ensured that even these super soldiers were not immune to its devastating toll. The first Spartan-I casualty served as a stark, horrifying reminder of the immense stakes and the limits of even their augmented capabilities. Spartan-034 Samuel was a towering figure among his comrades, possessing immense physical strength and an unyielding spirit. He was a close friend and confidant to John, a loyal and powerful presence in any engagement. Samuel's tragic fate unfolded during a mission in 2525, barely a year into the Covenant War, aboard a Covenant battle cruiser near the planet Kaiseti IV. The Spartan team, including John, Kelly, and Samuel, was tasked with destroying the cruiser from within. During the desperate fight, Samuel's Mjolnir armor was breached by a plasma grenade, compromising his life support and causing catastrophic damage. Knowing that he could not survive and that his presence would only hinder his team's escape, Samuel made the ultimate sacrifice. He volunteered to remain behind, detonating a high-explosive charge that destroyed the Covenant vessel, ensuring his team's survival and the mission's success. His death, the first among the Spartan-I's, was a profound shock to the remaining Spartans, a visceral lesson in the brutal cost of their war. It etched into their collective consciousness the understanding that even their superhuman strength and Mjolnir armor were not absolute guarantees against oblivion. Samuel's quiet heroism became a foundational legend, a testament to the unyielding commitment and self-sacrifice that defined the Spartan ethos. Another Spartan whose leadership qualities stood out was Spartan-051, Kurt. While not as outwardly charismatic as John, Kurt possessed an exceptional tactical mind and a deep, almost paternal, concern for the well-being of his team. His ability to anticipate enemy movements and adapt strategies on the fly made him an invaluable asset in command roles. Kurt's leadership was characterized by a meticulous attention to detail and a profound understanding of his team's individual strengths, allowing him to deploy them with maximum effectiveness. He was known for his calculated risks and his unwavering focus on mission objectives, even when faced with overwhelming odds. His quiet intensity and strategic foresight earned him immense respect from his peers and from Dr. Halsey herself, who recognized in him a unique capacity for independent thought and a profound sense of responsibility beyond mere obedience. These individual Spartans and others like them became the spearheads of humanity's desperate counteroffensive. They were deployed across the galaxy, often in small teams, to conduct operations that conventional forces could not even contemplate. They served as reconnaissance elements, scouting Covenant fleet movements and ground deployments. They were saboteurs, destroying critical Covenant infrastructure and supply lines. They were assassins, eliminating high-ranking Sangheili and other Covenant commanders, sowing disarray among the enemy's leadership. They were rescuers, extracting high-value UNSC personnel and critical intelligence from deep behind enemy lines. Their Mjolnir armor, constantly refined and upgraded by Dr. Halsey and her teams, allowed them to withstand the harshest environments and the fiercest Covenant assaults, making them virtually unstoppable on the battlefield. The burden carried by these Spartans was immense. They were not merely soldiers, they were the living embodiment of humanity's last hope, the silent answer to a genocidal threat. Their existence was a profound paradox: stolen children, robbed of their innocence, transformed into instruments of war, yet tasked with saving the very species that had inflicted such a fate upon them. Their bonds, forged in the crucible of shared trauma and relentless training, became an unbreakable brotherhood and sisterhood, a family utterly devoted to each other and to their singular purpose. They understood, perhaps more acutely than anyone else, the true cost of the war and the terrifying weight of their responsibility. As the war intensified and the Covenant drew ever closer to reach, the legends of these Spartans grew, even as their numbers dwindled. Each mission, each impossible victory, each tragic loss contributed to the tapestry of their quiet history, a narrative woven from sacrifice, heroism, and the unyielding will to survive. They were the thunderous roar of defiance against an impossible enemy, the gleaming tip of humanity's spear in its darkest hour. The stage was now set for the ultimate test, the defense of Reach, where these legends, forged in fire, would face an enemy that threatened to extinguish all hope, and where their individual fates would intertwine with the destiny of an entire species. The war had truly begun, and the Spartans, in their Mjolnir, were at its bleeding edge. Yet as their impossible victories mounted, as their legend grew, and as the desperate hope they embodied flickered brighter in the encroaching darkness, an unspoken question hung heavy in the classified air of ONI's deepest chambers. At what moral cost was this salvation being purchased? The Spartan-II program, for all its undeniable effectiveness, represented a profound ethical dilemma, a chilling testament to humanity's capacity for both unparalleled innovation and unimaginable depravity. It was a necessary evil, perhaps, but an evil nonetheless, one that would forever stain the conscience of those who authorized and executed it. Dr. Catherine Halsey, the program's architect, stood at the epicenter of this moral maelstrom, her intellect a formidable fortress against conventional ethical arguments. For her, the calculus was stark, uncompromising, and ultimately utilitarian. Humanity faced total annihilation. Billions of lives were at stake. Against this overwhelming threat, the individual autonomy and innocence of a mere 75 children, however tragic their fate, became a statistically negligible variable. Their sacrifice, in her cold, rational assessment, was not merely justified but obligatory, the only logical path to ensure the survival of an entire species. She believed with an unwavering conviction that the ends, the preservation of humankind, absolutely justified the means, no matter how morally repugnant those means might appear in peacetime. This philosophy, while terrifying in its implications, was born not of malice, but of a desperate, almost pathological commitment to humanity's continued existence. She saw herself not as a monster, but as a surgeon making an agonizing, yet ultimately life-saving, incision. The Office of Naval Intelligence, specifically its Section 3, provided the institutional framework and the necessary layers of secrecy for Halsey's vision to become reality. Admiral Margaret Perengoski, the formidable head of ONI, personally authorized the program, understanding its critical importance but also its potential to shatter public trust if ever exposed. The decision to classify Spartan-II under the highest security protocols was not merely for operational security. It was a deliberate act to shield the UNSC's high command and the wider public from the horrifying truth of its inception. The revelation that the UNSC, the supposed protector of humanity, had engaged in state-sanctioned kidnapping and child mutilation would have ignited an uncontainable firestorm, potentially fracturing human society at the very moment it needed to stand united against the Covenant. The public narrative, carefully crafted and disseminated by ONI propaganda, presented the Spartans as adult volunteers, paragons of courage and technological prowess, a comforting lie designed to inspire hope, not revulsion. The most profound moral stain of the Spartan-II program was undoubtedly Operation Kaleidoscope and the subsequent act of requisition. The methodical identification and abduction of 6-year-old children, plucked from their homes and families with chilling precision, represented a fundamental violation of human rights and the most basic tenets of civilized society. These children, chosen for their inherent genetic and intellectual potential, were denied any semblance of choice, their destinies irrevocably altered before they could even comprehend the meaning of such a concept. Their innocence was not merely lost, it was systematically stolen, replaced by a brutal regimen of training and augmentation, transforming them into instruments of war. The use of flash clones to replace the abducted children compounded the moral depravity of the act. These short-lived, genetically identical replicas, engineered to succumb to a rapidly degenerative disease, were a cruel deception. They allowed families to grieve, to mourn what they believed was a natural, albeit tragic, loss, never knowing that their son or daughter had been stolen, their life rewritten, and their future irrevocably altered. This act of manufactured grief, designed to prevent public outcry and maintain the program's secrecy, underscored the profound moral abyss into which ONI and Dr. Halsey had willingly plunged. It was a calculated act of psychological warfare waged not against the enemy, but against humanity's own unsuspecting populace, a betrayal of trust on an unprecedented scale. Furthermore, the augmentations themselves presented a deeply troubling ethical quandary. While the previous Project Orion had struggled with inconsistent results and high attrition rates on adult volunteers, the Spartan-II program deliberately targeted children precisely because of their biological plasticity. This decision, while scientifically sound for maximizing the success rate of the procedures, inherently exploited their vulnerability. The immense risks involved, evidenced by the tragic deaths of 30 children on the operating table and the crippling of 12 others, highlighted the brutal invasiveness of the process. These children did not volunteer for these procedures. They were subjected to them, their bodies irrevocably altered, their very biology rewritten for military purposes. They became, in essence, living weapons, fundamentally distinct from unaugmented humans, pushing the boundaries of what it meant to be human. Their physical and neurological changes, while granting them superhuman abilities, also alienated them from the very species they were created to protect. They were more than human in capability, but arguably less than human in terms of conventional societal integration and personal autonomy. The psychological conditioning, overseen by Chief Petty Officer Mendez and meticulously refined by Dr. Halsey, further contributed to this ethical quagmire. The systematic erasure of their past identities, the replacement of their names with numerical designations, and the relentless focus on mission parameters were all designed to strip them of conventional civilian attachments and mold them into utterly dedicated, fearless warriors. While this conditioning was essential for creating the unyielding resolve required for a Spartan, it also raised questions about their individual agency and their capacity for independent thought outside of their military purpose. Were they truly choosing to fight, or were they merely executing the programming instilled in them from childhood? The profound camaraderie forged among the Spartans, while a source of strength, also served to reinforce this collective identity, further cementing their detachment from the wider human society. They were a family, yes, but a family forged in trauma and defined by a singular, violent purpose. The paradox of the Spartans' existence became increasingly stark as the war progressed. They were humanity's greatest hope, yet their creation was a profound violation of humanity's core values. The Covenant, in their fanatical zeal, viewed humanity as an abomination to be purged. Yet in creating the Spartans was humanity not, in a chilling echo, becoming a twisted reflection of the very ruthlessness it abhorred. The Covenant referred to the Spartans as demons, a moniker that, while intended to demonize, also inadvertently acknowledged their terrifying effectiveness. This label, however, also carried a subtle, uncomfortable truth. In the desperate fight for survival, humanity had resorted to creating beings that pushed the boundaries of what was considered natural or moral, embracing a darkness to combat a greater darkness. Even within ONI, despite the unwavering resolve of Halsey and Parangoski, there were undoubtedly whispers of discomfort, quiet debates among those privy to the full truth. The weight of such decisions, the knowledge of the atrocities committed, could not have been borne lightly by all. While the exigencies of the war provided a powerful, almost unassailable justification, the moral scar remained, a silent testament to the extreme measures taken. The question of whether the Spartan-II program was truly a necessary evil was not merely a philosophical exercise. It was a deeply personal burden carried by a select few, a chilling secret that would forever define the hidden history of humanity's fight for survival. As the war intensified and the Spartans were deployed against the Covenant with increasing frequency and desperation, the immediate results of their existence overshadowed the ethical debates. They bought time, they retrieved intelligence, they disrupted enemy operations, and they provided undeniable proof that humanity possessed a weapon capable of standing against the alien tide. Each victory, however small, was a reprieve, a fleeting moment of hope in a war that otherwise promised only despair. The lives saved by the Spartans, however, were not a direct exchange for the lives stolen. They were a consequence of a profound moral compromise, a decision that traded the individual innocence of a few for the potential survival of many. The legacy of the Spartan-II program, therefore, was destined to be complex and profoundly ambiguous. It was a testament to humanity's indomitable will to survive, its ingenuity in the face of impossible odds, and its capacity for self-sacrifice. Yet it was also a stark reminder of the ethical lines that were crossed, the innocence that was sacrificed, and the profound moral cost of fighting a genocidal war. The Spartans were heroes, saviors, and legends, but they were also victims, products of a desperate, terrifying choice made in humanity's darkest hour. Their quiet history, etched in sacrifice and moral compromise, was not merely a chronicle of heroism, but a somber reflection on the ethical abyss humanity had dared to gaze into, and from which it had drawn its most formidable and most tragic weapon. The question of whether it was truly a necessary evil would linger long after the war's end, a haunting echo in the annals of human history, a constant reminder of the price paid for survival. The question of whether it was truly a necessary evil would linger long after the war's end, a haunting echo in the annals of human history, a constant reminder of the price paid for survival. The Covenant War, a protracted and brutal conflict that had consumed humanity for nearly 3 decades, did not conclude with a decisive, triumphant victory in the conventional sense. Instead, its end was a complex tapestry woven from desperation, internal alien strife, and humanity's unexpected alliances. The ultimate salvation did not arrive as a singular, glorious battle, but rather as a profound schism within the Covenant itself. The prophets, the zealous leaders of the alien alliance, in their fanatical pursuit of the mythical forerunner, Great Journey, alienated their most formidable warriors, the Sangheli, or elites. This internal betrayal, culminating in the genocidal purge known as the Great Schism, fractured the Covenant into warring factions. Humanity, with its back against the wall and facing imminent extinction, seized this unforeseen opportunity, forging a desperate alliance with the separatist Sangheli forces. This fragile, uneasy coalition fought alongside humanity in the final, cataclysmic engagements, most notably the Battle of the Ark in 2552. In a desperate, galaxy-spanning confrontation, the combined forces managed to thwart the Prophet of Truth's apocalyptic plan, preventing the activation of the Halo rings and ultimately securing the defeat of the remaining loyalist Covenant forces. The war, which had claimed billions of human lives and glassed hundreds of worlds, finally drew to a close, leaving behind a scarred galaxy and a humanity profoundly traumatized but miraculously, defiantly alive. The immediate aftermath was a period of immense relief, yet also profound exhaustion, grief, and an overwhelming sense of the sheer cost of survival. Humanity had prevailed, but it was a victory etched in blood, ashes, and an unbearable weight of sacrifice. With the immediate, existential threat of the Covenant largely neutralized, the strategic imperative that had once justified the Spartan-II program began to wane. The desperate hour which had demanded such profound moral compromise had passed. The galaxy, though still dangerous with splinter Covenant factions and emerging threats, was no longer teetering on the brink of total annihilation. In this uneasy peace, the ethical questions surrounding the Spartan-II program, once suppressed by the dire necessity of survival, began to resurface within the hushed chambers of ONI and even in the broader, albeit still carefully managed, discourse of the UNSC. The Spartan-II program in its original form was simply too controversial, too ethically fraught to continue. Public exposure of its true methods, the state-sanctioned abduction of children, the use of flash clones, and the irreversible augmentations performed on unwilling subjects, remained a catastrophic risk. Such a revelation would not only shatter public trust in the UNSC, but also ignite an uncontainable firestorm of moral outrage, potentially fracturing a human society already reeling from decades of war. The program had been a secret weapon, a desperate measure, and now, in the light of a tenuous peace, its dark origins threatened to become a liability. The prevailing sentiment within the UNSC High Command and ONI was that while the Spartans had undoubtedly saved humanity, their creation could never be openly acknowledged or replicated. Consequently, the Spartan-II program, as a recruitment and augmentation initiative, was quietly but definitively decommissioned. There would be no more child abductions, no more flash clones, and no more experimental augmentations performed on unwilling minors. The surviving Spartan-I's, now numbering in the low 20s, represented a finite, irreplaceable resource. Their existence was a testament to a bygone era of desperate warfare, a relic of humanity's darkest hour. They continued to serve, but the methodology that created them was relegated to the deepest, most heavily classified archives of ONI, never to be spoken of openly. The surviving Spartan-I's, now fully grown adults in their mid-30s, found their roles evolving. While they remained humanity's most potent instruments of war, their deployments shifted. They were no longer exclusively sent on suicidal, deep reconnaissance missions behind enemy lines. Instead, many were integrated into more conventional military structures, albeit in specialized, high-threat capacities. They served as critical assets in combating residual Covenant forces, neutralizing resurgent insurrectionist cells, and undertaking sensitive missions that required their unparalleled combat prowess and strategic acumen. Their Mjolnir armor continued to be refined and upgraded, ensuring they remained at the cutting edge of human military technology. John 1:17, the Master Chief, became the quintessential Spartan, his legend solidified by his pivotal role in the war's end. Other Spartans, such as Kelly and Fred 104, continued to lead their own teams, often mentoring younger, unaugmented Special Forces operatives, their very presence a source of inspiration and deterrence. However, the nature of their existence meant that a return to civilian life was never a viable option for the Spartan-I's. Their bodies were fundamentally altered, their minds honed for war, and their identities inextricably linked to their designation as Spartans. They were products of a system designed to strip them of their past and forge them into something new. That transformation was irreversible. Their bonds of brotherhood and sisterhood, forged in shared trauma and relentless training, remained the strongest connection they possessed, a new family in the absence of the ones they had lost. They were heroes, yes, but heroes forever set apart, living embodiments of humanity's most profound sacrifice. Dr. Catherine Halsey, the brilliant and morally ambiguous architect of the program, found her position profoundly altered in the post-war landscape. While her genius had undeniably provided humanity with its ultimate weapon and contributed immeasurably to its survival, her methods were now under intense scrutiny, even within ONI. She became a controversial figure, admired for her scientific breakthroughs, but increasingly reviled for the ethical lines she had so willingly crossed. Her direct involvement in the abductions and augmentations, once deemed a necessary evil, now cast a long, dark shadow over her legacy. She continued her research, often in isolation or under close watch, her formidable intellect still considered too valuable to discard entirely, especially given her unparalleled knowledge of Forerunner technology and artificial intelligence. Her relationship with the surviving Spartans remained complex. She was their creator, their mother in a sense, and fiercely protective of them, even as they became increasingly independent. Her eventual capture by ONI and subsequent involvement in further galactic crises underscored her enduring, if contentious, relevance. Even as the Spartan-I program ceased its original recruitment, the undeniable success of the super soldier concept during the Covenant War ensured that the asterisk idea of Spartans would not die. The UNSC recognized that future threats, whether from splinter Covenant factions, newly encountered alien species, or resurgent insurrectionist movements, would necessitate highly capable, augmented warriors. The challenge was to create new generations of Spartans without repeating the moral atrocities of the Spartan-I program. This led to the development of subsequent Spartan generations, each representing a different approach to the ethical dilemma. The first attempt at a new model was the Spartan-II program, initiated by ONI Section 3 in 2531, even as the Covenant War raged. Recognizing the prohibitive cost and ethical quagmire of the Spartans, the Spartan-II program aimed for a more cost-effective, larger-scale deployment of super soldiers. These candidates were primarily orphans of the Covenant War, children who had lost everything, often with a burning desire for revenge. While still ethically dubious as they were child soldiers, their recruitment did not involve abduction or the use of flash clones, thus avoiding the most egregious moral violations of Spartan-II. Their augmentations were less invasive, less expensive, and carried a lower mortality rate, though they did not achieve the same raw physical power as the Spartan-Is. Crucially, Spartan-Is were equipped with cheaper, mass-produced Mjolnir variants or specialized semi-powered infiltration armor, SPI armor, designed for high attrition, often suicidal, missions where their sheer numbers could overwhelm enemy forces. They were, in essence, more disposable, a grim reflection of humanity's continued desperation. Many Spartan-Is fought and died heroically, becoming unsung legends whose sacrifices bought precious time for humanity. The true decline of the Spartan-I * model and the ethical shift towards a more sustainable and morally palatable super soldier program came with the introduction of the Spartan-IV program in 2553, immediately following the end of the Covenant War. This initiative represented a fundamental departure from its predecessors. Spartan-IVs were adult volunteers, drawn from the ranks of highly decorated UNSC personnel, special forces operatives, and even former insurrectionists who had proven their loyalty. Their augmentations were less invasive and significantly safer than those of the Spartan-Is, relying on advanced biotechnology and cybernetic implants that enhanced their capabilities without the same drastic biological restructuring or the severe risks. Critically, these augmentations were performed on fully consenting adults, a stark contrast to the involuntary procedures of Spartan-I. Spartan-IVs were also equipped with a new generation of Mjolnir armor, which, while still advanced, was designed to be modular, easier to produce, and more adaptable for a larger cohort of augmented soldiers. The Spartan-Is, the original demons, often served as mentors, instructors, and even field commanders for these newer generations. Their unparalleled combat experience and strategic insights were invaluable in shaping the tactics and training of the Spartan-IVs. They were living legends, walking embodiments of a brutal history, their presence a constant reminder of the extreme lengths humanity had gone to survive. While the Spartan-IVs represented a more ethical and scalable approach to super soldier deployment, the Spartan-Is remained a distinct, irreplaceable cohort, possessing a raw power and an almost mythical aura that no subsequent program could fully replicate. The long-term impact of the Spartan-I program was thus multifaceted and enduring. It had irrevocably shaped UNSC military doctrine, proving the overwhelming effectiveness of augmented human warriors in asymmetric warfare. The Spartans became an enduring symbol of humanity's resilience, their legend inspiring countless soldiers and civilians alike. Yet the ethical debate, though often suppressed and rarely discussed openly, continued to simmer beneath the surface, a haunting undercurrent in the narrative of their heroism. The Spartan-I program, while officially discontinued in its original form, laid the foundational groundwork for all future super soldier initiatives, proving the concept even if the methods were never to be repeated. It served as a stark, chilling reminder of the price of survival, a testament to humanity's indomitable will to endure, even if that will lead them to gaze into the darkest corners of their own morality. The quiet history of the Spartan-Is, born of humanity's deepest fear and etched in sacrifice and moral compromise, continued to echo through the galaxy, a testament to the fact that even in victory, some wounds never truly heal and some questions never find easy answers. The quiet history of the Spartan-I program, born of humanity's deepest fear and etched in sacrifice and moral compromise, continued to echo through the galaxy, a testament to the fact that even in victory, some wounds never truly heal, and some questions never find easy answers. While the immediate existential threat of the Covenant had largely receded, and the original Spartan-I recruitment and augmentation initiative had been definitively decommissioned, the profound legacy of these super soldiers and the morally ambiguous circumstances of their creation cast a long, enduring shadow over humanity's future. The impact of the Spartan-II program extended far beyond the battlefield, permeating military doctrine, technological development, public perception, and most profoundly, the collective conscience of the United Nations Space Command. For the surviving Spartan-I's, numbering now in the low 20s, the cessation of their program did not signify an end to their service. Rather, it cemented their status as a finite, irreplaceable resource, living relics of a desperate age. They were humanity's most potent instruments of war, their unique blend of augmented physiology, Mjolnir armor, and unparalleled combat experience, rendering them indispensable in the turbulent post-war galaxy. Their roles continued to evolve, transitioning from solely deep reconnaissance and surgical strike missions to more integrated, yet still specialized, capacities within the UNSC. They became the vanguard against splinter Covenant factions, the silent enforcers against resurgent insurrectionist cells, and the spearhead in exploration of newly discovered Forerunner sites. John 1:17, the Master Chief, solidified his legend, becoming the quintessential Spartan, his very name a beacon of defiance and an icon of humanity's enduring will. Other Spartans, such as Kelly and Fred 104, continued to lead their own specialized teams, often mentoring younger, unaugmented Special Forces operatives, their presence a source of inspiration and a formidable deterrent. They were not merely soldiers, they were living legends, their every action reinforcing the myth of the invincible Spartan. Yet the nature of their existence meant that a return to conventional civilian life was never a viable option for these original Spartans. Their bodies were fundamentally altered, their minds honed for perpetual war, and their identities inextricably linked to their designation as Spartans. They were products of a system designed to strip them of their past and forge them into something entirely new. That transformation was irreversible. The profound bonds of brotherhood and sisterhood, forged in shared trauma and relentless training, remained the strongest connection they possessed, a new family in the absence of the ones they had lost. They were heroes, yes, but heroes forever set apart, living embodiments of humanity's most profound sacrifice, their inner quietude often masking the profound weight of their unique existence. The ethical shadow of the Spartan-II program, though largely hidden from the public, continued to haunt the inner sanctums of ONI and the highest echelons of the UNSC. The question of whether the ends truly justified the means persisted, a silent, moral burden carried by those few who knew the full truth. The immense victory against the Covenant, purchased at the cost of 75 stolen childhoods and the lives of dozens of children, forced a profound introspection within the organization. While no one could deny the Spartans' critical role in humanity's survival, the memory of Operation Kaleidoscope, the Flash clones, and the agonizing augmentations served as a constant, chilling reminder of the ethical lines that had been irrevocably crossed. This internal reckoning ensured a fierce, unwavering commitment to maintaining the program's secrecy, understanding that public revelation would not merely be damaging, but catastrophic, potentially fracturing human society at its most vulnerable point. The preservation of the Spartan myth, therefore, became as critical as their continued military service, a carefully constructed narrative of heroism designed to inspire hope, not revulsion. Dr. Catherine Halsey, the brilliant and morally ambiguous architect of the program, found her position profoundly altered in the post-war landscape. While her genius had undeniably provided humanity with its ultimate weapon and contributed immeasurably to its survival, her methods were now under intense scrutiny, even within the guarded walls of ONI. She became a controversial figure, admired for her scientific breakthroughs, but increasingly reviled for the ethical lines she had so willingly crossed. Her direct involvement in the abductions and augmentations, once deemed a necessary evil, now cast a long, dark shadow over her legacy. She continued her research, often in isolation or under close watch, her formidable intellect still considered too valuable to discard entirely, especially given her unparalleled knowledge of Forerunner technology and artificial intelligence. Her relationship with the surviving Spartans remained complex, she was their creator, their mother in a sense, and fiercely protective of them, even as they became increasingly independent. She understood their unique burden, perhaps better than anyone else, and often served as their staunchest, albeit solitary, advocate within the cold machinery of ONI. Her eventual capture by ONI and subsequent involvement in further galactic crises underscored her enduring, if contentious, relevance, a figure forever intertwined with humanity's darkest, yet most vital secret. Beyond the individual Spartans and their creator, the Spartan-II program profoundly reshaped UNSC military doctrine and technological development. The concept of the super soldier, once a speculative notion, had been definitively proven, permanently altering the paradigm of warfare. Asymmetrical tactics, precision strikes, and the deployment of highly augmented individuals capable of tipping the scales against numerically superior forces became deeply ingrained in UNSC strategy. The lessons learned from the Spartans' engagements, their methods of infiltration, combat, and extraction, were meticulously analyzed and integrated into training programs for all branches of the military, albeit in diluted forms suitable for unaugmented personnel. The effectiveness of a small, elite force capable of achieving disproportionate impact became a core tenet of post-war military planning. The Mjolnir-powered assault armor system, initially designed exclusively for the Spartan-I's, underwent continuous refinement and evolution, becoming a foundational technology for future military applications. Its integrated energy shielding, once a revolutionary breakthrough, became a standard defensive measure for advanced UNSC vehicles and starships. The principles of its force-multiplying servos and neural interface technology influenced the design of heavy exoskeletons for engineers, advanced flight suits for pilots, and even prosthetic limbs for wounded soldiers. Each new iteration of Mjolnir armor, from Mark V to Mark VI and beyond, pushed the boundaries of human engineering, continually enhancing Spartan capabilities and maintaining their technological edge. The armor itself became an icon, a testament to humanity's ingenuity and its relentless pursuit of an advantage against overwhelming odds. The very existence of Mjolnir and the Spartans who wore it forced humanity to accelerate its technological development at an unprecedented rate, a direct, undeniable legacy of the war. The undeniable success of the super soldier concept during the Covenant War ensured that the asterisk idea of Spartans would not die, even as the ethical quagmire of the Spartan-II program made its original methodology unsustainable. This led directly to the development of subsequent Spartan generations, each representing a different approach to the ethical dilemma, a continuous effort to replicate the Spartan-I's effectiveness without repeating their profound moral cost. The Spartan-II program, initiated by ONI Section 3 in 2531, even as the Covenant War raged, aimed for a more cost-effective, larger-scale deployment. These candidates were primarily orphans of the Covenant War, children who had lost everything, often with a burning desire for revenge. While still ethically dubious as they were child soldiers, their recruitment did not involve abduction or the use of flash clones, thus avoiding the most egregious moral violations of Spartan-II. Their augmentations were less invasive, less expensive, and carried a lower mortality rate, though they did not achieve the same raw physical power as the Spartan-I's. Equipped with cheaper, mass-produced Mjolnir variants or specialized semi-powered infiltration, SPI, armor, Spartan-IIs were designed for high attrition, often suicidal, missions where their sheer numbers could overwhelm enemy forces. They were, in essence, more disposable, a grim reflection of humanity's continued desperation. Many Spartan-IIs fought and died heroically, becoming unsung legends whose sacrifices bought precious time for humanity, their quiet courage echoing the sacrifice of their predecessors. The true ethical shift and the establishment of a more sustainable super soldier program came with the introduction of the Spartan-IV program in 2553, immediately following the end of the Covenant War. This initiative represented a fundamental departure from its predecessors. Spartan IVs were adult volunteers, drawn from the ranks of highly decorated UNSC personnel, special forces operatives, and even former insurrectionists who had proven their loyalty. Their augmentations were less invasive and significantly safer than those of the Spartans, relying on advanced biotechnology and cybernetic implants that enhanced their capabilities without the same drastic biological restructuring or the severe risks. Critically, these augmentations were performed on fully consenting adults, a stark contrast to the involuntary procedures of Spartan-I. Spartan IVs were also equipped with a new generation of Mjolnir armor, which, while still advanced, was designed to be modular, easier to produce, and more adaptable for a larger cohort of augmented soldiers. The Spartan Is, the original demons, often served as mentors, instructors, and even field commanders for these newer generations. Their unparalleled combat experience and strategic insights were invaluable in shaping the tactics and training of the Spartan IVs, ensuring that the hard-won lessons of their generation were passed down. They were living legends, walking embodiments of a brutal history, their presence a constant reminder of the extreme lengths humanity had gone to survive. The preservation of this quiet history became an ongoing, clandestine operation within ONI. The full truth of the Spartan-I program was meticulously documented and archived in deep-vaulted, quantum-encrypted servers, accessible only to a vanishingly small number of individuals with the highest security clearances. Dr. Halsey's personal journals, detailing every aspect of the program from its inception to the individual psychological profiles of each Spartan, became the most comprehensive and most damning record. These documents were not meant for public consumption, nor for casual review. They were a historical burden, a testament to what humanity was capable of when faced with extinction. The few individuals who bore the weight of this knowledge carried it with a profound sense of responsibility, understanding that the truth, if unleashed, could unravel the very fabric of the society the Spartans had saved. Ultimately, the legacy of the Spartan-I program transcended mere military success. It became a profound and complex reflection on humanity itself. It demonstrated an indomitable will to survive, an unparalleled ingenuity in the face of impossible odds, and a chilling capacity for self-sacrifice, even if that sacrifice was involuntary. The Spartans were heroes, saviors, and legends, but they were also victims, products of a desperate, terrifying choice made in humanity's darkest hour. Their existence forced humanity to confront the uncomfortable truth that in the desperate fight for survival, it had resorted to creating beings that pushed the boundaries of what was considered natural or moral, embracing a darkness to combat a greater darkness. The question of whether it was truly a necessary evil continued to linger, a haunting echo in the annals of human history, a constant reminder of the profound price paid for survival, and the quiet, enduring impact of a history remembered only by a select, burdened few.